Hiyo tena inakuanga hivyo.
No, I'm not saying I'm
Tena inakuanga hivyo.
Yes, kwa mlango.
Hivyo.
Bedroom.
Why you bado kujia hapo bwana? One and okay, one tu peke yake. But but
Yes.
kile just one ndio sababu kuja. Kubali giziona
Habari itakuja. It's coming. You don't have 10 minutes.
It's only already almost.
Don't touch things.
no one ndio bado one. My long bado.
Where are these people? Eh? Kina Mwali. Si wazi panga hivi meanwhile we don't have one.
Si mmepanga tayari, unataka wapange aje?
Tunapanga only one ndio. Ndio na
Wapange 8 ama Ebuni, nitafutie clock 6. Hiyo 7 inakimshanga nyuma.
Clock number 6.
Yes. Still tap.
Sibosema kusema clock 6 haifanyi.
Inafanya. 7 ndio na yeah. Italy is here.
Mbona mnasumbua na kamera?
Wapi kamera?
Zilikuwa zimeenda zote.
Wapi?
But is that camera 1?
Kamera 1 hapana bado hujapata.
Nasema ndio hii iko hapo.
Hapana. Hiyo ni 6.
Oh, hiyo naiona hapo.
The one msimu ya.
Oh, 6.
The one msimu. Sio the one.
Naiona na which camera?
Itaitwa
Camera 1 kama
hiyo position.
Just check the video inakaa sababu.
Hiyo position ni hizi kwa wala.
Please. Camera 1 tunataka kuyaongeze nasema. Vile inakaa audition.
Tulikuwa tunatafuta 6.
Kamera gani nimekaa kwa nani? Bali kwa speaker juu.
I don't find the
Hebu sasa can you work it out without camera 1?
He's the chief engineer, my friend.
no what you are saying.
I cannot set akikaa kwa desk
Yeah,
siweza.
you have to freeze your
He's the chief engineer. So
Please.
siwezi hata kukuza kamera zinazo hapa.
What is Ramadani ya tu?
No. Don't please.
Sasa wacha afanye.
You are dealing with more than 2 people here.
Unajua you're handling more than one.
Yes.
Hatuna freeze na watu wako.
Kama ni wawili hapa ni
Zoom out your.
Na sio 6 utangaze wewe.
Kama ni watatu.
Haya, tuache tosha. Tilt. Yeah, tosha.
ndio threshold kama hiyo msala na wao chini.
Haya, tuko kwa 6 now.
So unajua one kabla itokee hapa ni wa challenge.
Imetokea wapi?
It's offline.
Error.
Sasa unless tuombe nini kuje hiyo stima split no.
Shtuka bwana.
Mweli hata kutia. Mweli sio tanza kijana.
Yeah, you know, I don't know this thing very much. Na sasa hii
is coming.
Nini
It is coming. Na itakuja tu yenyewe.
kwa tunazima zote.
Kamera nimekataa
Silikuwa na
Unajua kamera 1 3 5 7 9 zilikuwa zinarukaruka.
Ama odd numbers.
Zilikuwa zinarukaruka sasa zote.
That's what inapiana hapo.
Sasa 1 itakuja tu.
Hapo kile inaendelea kila time.
nini?
Kwa kama wale hivi inatoa hiyo kwenye shot.
Kwanza imepana.
Hebu angalia 50 bob kwa hiyo.
Angalia kamera 7.
Hawa ni wao kule ndio kule kama ni
Gani hiyo?
sio ndio
Hiyo mbele kabisa.
Hiyo hakwenda huko.
the long shot kama wale wao wapi? Inafaa tupate kamera gani?
Opposite huko ni kuna kamera 8 na 9. 8 na 9. Nikuta hiyo kamera 8 na 9.
Inakaa
8 from the side of the opposition. Kwenda kwa mlango.
Kama ndio hebu
Ni hiyo?
Na pale kama inaangalia.
Kwa sababu imeangalia mahali kama angalia.
No, it's coming there.
Kwa 3 ona kwa 3 imeangalia huku juu kwa kibao huku juu. Unaona imeangalia kwa kibao. Kamera yenyewe ndio ile click imeangalia straight. Uone?
Straight kwa nini?
Kwa kibao.
Kamera 3 huwezi ona kamera 3.
Asisemi kuona kamera yenyewe, mimi nasema kuona madini point.
Watu si kama iko offline.
Hizi kamera
Ile
zilizo
offline ni wakati umeenda
juu kama ile sasa hiyo ya. Kamera 8 and 9.
Lakini position yake hata wana ikangi hivyo, wani inafaa kwa anangu hata
kuangalia
degree like this. Yeah.
No, it's only that they jakuja hapo, it's coming. Yeah.
Kila kwa kile usikie kabla watu wajie hapa.
Sasa hii zimebaki dakika 8.
Ndio usikie tu juu hakuna mtu hapo. Utoe tu hiyo ila nini hiyo.
Kizima huko saba na wapisha.
Wote unajua kila dakika ni kama ndio kamera karibu hiyo tangu wale power supply. Nataka tu ile ukiona inakaima sana inaenda mahali utakwama ofisi, lakini ukitoa net na uweke utashtua.
Because kama hiyo 6 ilikuwa
na kiingia kabla waingie ndani.
Sasa ndio kupanga.
Ile katatu.
Ukipa na mimi phone nimwambia kimbie. Alafu na mimi pia unajua pia kufuata kwambie mwambie kimbie. Washo pia
Washo ya boss.
Ndio 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 unaweza kupata this woman.
Ni watu wa links.
Ndio watu wa kujaribu.
Watu wa links wewe.
Huyu anaongea ile wakati atakuwa in charge. Hawa ndio watakiona ndio atakuwa.
Sawa, tupiga kamera picha.
Bado kabisa.
Mwani?
Sasa hii 8 itakuwa ni
Sedena.
Ndio huyo hapo unamwona hapo kijana. Ala, kwani hawezi kusikia?
Ni mbali.
Aya, sio mbali.
Nini?
Haisikia.
Nasikia audio huko kwa YouTube. Wewe na audio.
Itatoa. We ask you how.
How? We have no microphones here.
Aya, wewe imagine. Sio kile hata leo kwa ndio vizuri. Anaweza fikia hapo sio mbali.
I know what is happening.
Unless it was changed. Ama
Go there. Just a moment.
Kama kuna microphone.
very good afternoon to you. Thank you very much for tuning in. These are live pictures from the chambers of the National Assembly. It is the afternoon of Wednesday, 17th of May 2017. The business of the afternoon or the business of the day will be commencing in a couple of minutes. This is a broadcast brought to you by the Parliamentary Broadcasting Unit in conjunction with the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation. It is a broadcast available on Bunge TV as well as KBC Channel 1. My name is Edward Kabasam. We'll be taking a look at the order of business this afternoon. It is going to be quite a busy one. There are a number of bills which some of them will be read for the first time, as well as some motions. And these motions, two of them are procedural. One of the procedural motions is with regards to the exemption of a bill from the provisions of Standing Order 141, Paragraph 1, that given that the Division of Revenue Bill, National Assembly Bill number 2 of 2017, had been passed by the National Assembly, amended by the Senate, and subsequently defeated when the Mediation Committee failed to agree on a version of the bill within 30 days, in accordance with the provisions of Article 113, Paragraph 4 of the Constitution. This House resolves that the Division of Revenue number 2 Bill, National Assembly Bill number 22 of 2017, be exempted from the provisions of Standing Order 141, Paragraph 1, which provides that a bill, the second reading or third reading of which has been rejected, may be introduced again in the next session or after the elapse of 6 months in the same session, but subject to fresh publication as provided in Standing Order 114. The Division of Revenue Bill will therefore, if the procedural motion passes, it will therefore be read for the first time because it is being tabled before the House again. And the principal objective of this bill is to provide for the equitable division of revenue raised nationally among the national and county levels of government as required by Article 218 of the Constitution, in order to facilitate the proper functioning of county government and to ensure continuity of county services. If you are just joining us, the Speaker of the National Assembly, the Honorable Justin Muturi, has stepped into the chambers. This is a broadcast which is available on Bunge TV and also on KBC Channel 1. Now I will hand you over so that you can follow these proceedings live.
Let us pray. Almighty God, we in your wisdom and goodness have appointed the office of leaders and parliaments for the welfare of society and the just government of the people. We beseech you to behold with your abundant favor as your servants whom you've been pleased to call to the performance of important trusts in this republic. Let your blessings descend upon us here assembled, and grant that we treat and consider all matters that shall come under deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to promote your honor and glory, and to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of our country and of those whose interests we are committed to our charge. Amen. Ring the bell, please.
After the first procedural motion that will be seeking to reintroduce the Division of Revenue Bill, which had been amended by the Senate and also failed to go through the to sail through the mediation committee, there will be another procedural motion on the reduction of publication period of a bill that pursuant to the provision of Standing Order 120. This House resolves to reduce the publication period of the Division of Revenue Bill from 14 days to 6 days, probably to hasten up the process of making sure that the House do agree on the way forward as regards to this bill. Now, the Division of Revenue Bill 2017 proposes to allocate to county governments 323.8 billion shillings in the financial year 2017-2018, which relative to the 2016-2017 allocation reflects an increase of 21.6 billion shillings. This allocation comprises of an equitable share of 291.1 billion shillings and additional conditional allocations from the share of national government revenue amounting to 32.6 billion shillings. So those are some of the briefs within the Division of Revenue Bill, which will be read for the first time this afternoon. Of course, it had been here and it had gone to the Senate, where the Senate did propose some amendments, but it did go to the mediation committee, but failed to sail through. So two procedural motions, one seeking to reintroduce it again, and the other one seeking to reduce the publication days from 14 to 6 days, just to ensure that this bill do sail through. Also, before this House this evening or this afternoon will be the President's Award Bill, and the principal object of this bill is to anchor the existence and practice of the President's Award Kenya in statute law. I will hand you over now because quorum has been achieved.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair.
This one's a... Honourable members, member for Kadiani. Honourable members, the Kenya National Assembly Prayer Fellowship Group shall host the annual National Prayer Breakfast on Thursday, May 25th, 2017, at the Safari Park Hotel, Nairobi. It is expected that over 2,500 guests, who comprise of political, business, and religious leaders, shall be in attendance. The theme for this year's prayer breakfast is Unity and the National Anthem. The prayer breakfast shall be an interdenominational prayer meeting organized by members of Parliament with support from friends. All members of Parliament are requested to pick the invitation cards to this event at the main reception and confirm attendance by Tuesday, May 23rd, 2017, in order to facilitate seating arrangements. You may contact the chairman of the prayer breakfast group, the Honorable Captain Clement Mushiri Wambugu, who is also the Member of Parliament for Mathioya constituency, for any further clarifications. I thank you.
Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions.
Member for Honorable Jacob Machari.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I had assigned on behalf of area residents and business people of Ladi Trading Center in Molo constituency, draw the attention of the House to the following. That Ladi Trading Center was established along the Elbagon Molo, Class C56 Road in 1986, with various business people and residents settling there. 2, that the then Town Council of Molo subdivided the land located at the trading center for the settlement of these locals, going ahead to collect land acquisition fees and issuing the residents with allocation letters for the plots in February 2006. That there are currently around 62 residents domiciled in this area, covering 3.5 acres. That in February 2017, the Kenya National Authority, Highways Authority, KENHA, put up beacons at the trading center, declaring it a road reserve, and ordered the residents to vacate the land by June 2017. That this land is the main source of livelihood and residence for the local who have been living and working on it, and its laws would destabilize the residents and cause untold suffering and anguish due to the loss of homes and businesses. And that the issues in respect of this petition is made are not pending before any court of law, constitutional or legal body. Therefore, your humble petitioners play that the National Assembly, through the Departmental Committee on Lands, 1, intervenes to have the area residents relocated and resettled in a more suitable land, in a more suitable location, and 2, makes any other further orders deemed fit in the circumstances of the petitioner, and your humble petitioners will forever play. Thank you.
The petition stands committed to the relevant departmental committee. Next order.
Order number 5, papers.
But of course, members, you appreciate that a committee has 60 days within which to consider a petition. And I do not see you sit and hear beyond the 15th of June. I don't know whether the committee will have time to sit and consider that petition, but we wish them well in their endeavors. Proceed, Honorable Kato.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I bear to lay the following papers on the table of the House today, Wednesday, May 17th, 2017. 1, the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics Economic Survey 2017, the annual report and financial statement for the Teachers Service Commission for the year ended 30th June 2015, the report of the Auditor General on financial statements of Pest Control Products Board for the year ended 30th June 2015 and the certificate therein, the reports of the Auditor General on the financial statements in respect of the following institution for the year ended 30th June 2016 and the certificates therein. A, Kenya Industrial Property Institution or Kenya Property Industrial Institute, the Agricultural Finance Corporation, Kenya Investment Authority, Kipchabo Tea Factory Limited, which is a subsidiary of Nyayo Tea Zones Development Corporation, Nyayo Tea Zone Development Corporation, the Provident Fund, Asian Officers Family Pension Fund, Kenya Local Loan Support Fund, Revenue Statement from the Pension Department, European Widows and Orphans Pension Scheme Fund, the National Gender Equality Commission, and the Public Service Commission. Mr. Speaker, I have another paper to lay that I beg to lay the following papers on the table of the House today, Wednesday, May 17th, 2017. The report of the Joint Parliamentary Select Committee on the election of members to the East African Legislative Assembly elections on its consideration of nominees for election as members of the East African Legislative Assembly elections. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Pukose.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the House today, Wednesday, May 17, 2017. The report of the Mediation Committee on the Health Bill, National Assembly Bill number 14 of 2015. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Next order.
Order number 6, notices of motion.
Honorable Pukot, Honorable Kato.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice of the following motion, that pursuant to Article 50 of the Treaty for the Establishment of the East African Community and Rule 13, Subclause 5 of the East African Legislative Assembly election, the selection of members of the Assembly Rules 2017, this House adopts the report of the Joint Parliamentary Select Committee on the election of members to the East African Legislative Assembly on its consideration of the nominees for election as members of the East African Legislative Assembly, laid on the table of the House today, Wednesday, May 17th, 2017. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Pukose.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I beg to give notice of the following motion, that pursuant to the provisions of Article 113, Subclause 2 of the Constitution and Standing Order 150, this House adopts a report of the Mediation Committee on its consideration of the Health Bill, National Assembly Bill number 14 of 2015, laid on the table of the House today, Wednesday, May 17, 2017, and approves the mediated version of the Health Bill 2015. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. Next order.
Order number 7, statements. Order number 8, procedural motion, exemption of a bill from the provisions of Standing Order 141-1.
Chair Budget Committee.
Much obliged, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, given that the Division of Revenue Bill, National Assembly Bill number 2 of 2017, had been passed by the National Assembly, amended by the Senate, and subsequently defeated when the Mediation Committee failed to agree on a version of the bill within 30 days, and in accordance with the provisions of Article 1134 of the Constitution, this House resolves that the Division of Revenue Bill number 2, Bill National Assembly Bill number 22 of 2017, be exempted from the provisions of Standing Order 141-1, which provides that a bill, the second reading or the third reading of which has been rejected, may be introduced again in the next session or after the lapse of 6 months in the same session, but subject to fresh publication as provided in Standing Order 114. Mr. Speaker, as you are aware, you yourself directed that the Budget and Appropriations Committee deliberates on the matter of the Division of Revenue Bill, and guided by you, we have sought a republication of that bill, Mr. Speaker. But the law is very, very clear that unless we shorten the time, by the time we prosecute the matter, if we follow the normal procedure, it will be not possible for this Parliament to do so, because this Parliament's life comes to an end within that period. Mr. Speaker, I think all of us know how important the Division of Revenue Bill is, as has been mentioned in the motion. We did try to find a consensus within the Mediation Committee that I was honored to chair, and we now need to meet and find direction, hopefully sooner than later, so that the county governments can begin to appropriate their funds. This matter, Mr. Speaker, is urgent, and the country is waiting for us to make forward movement on the issue. It is therefore with that in mind, Mr. Speaker, that we are seeking that the period be reduced as is proposed by the motion. And I wish, Mr. Speaker, to move as such and request the Honorable Dr. Makali Mulu, the member for Kitui Central, to kindly second the motion. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Makali Mulu.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I do rise to second this procedural motion on the exemption of a bill from the provision of the Standing Order 141, Section 1. Mr. Speaker, we are aware about the Division of Revenue Bill, which this House actually passed, but as a result of the amendments done by the Senate and the failure by the Mediation Committee to agree on the proposed changes, Mr. Speaker, that it was not possible to get the bill passed. So on the basis of that, Mr. Speaker, and bearing in mind the importance of this particular bill, Mr. Speaker, I want to urge my colleagues that we pass this procedural motion so that we can get debate on this bill again starting, Mr. Speaker, because just as the chairman has said, Mr. Speaker, it's obvious that unless this bill is passed to become an act of parliament, then the county government will have a challenge in terms of preparing the county allocation of revenue bill. And I think it's important really we support so that we pave way for that other important stage to start, Mr. Speaker. So I want to urge my colleagues, Mr. Speaker, that even though we know this is not, I think this is the first time as a House we have been subject to discussing what we are discussing in relation to a division of revenue bill. It is important that we pass this procedural motion to allow the county governments to have their budgets also finalized. With those remarks, Mr. Speaker, I second the procedural motion. Thank you.
Honourable members, I propose the question, which is that given that the Division of Revenue Bill, National Assembly Bill number 2 of 2017, had been passed by the National Assembly, amended by the Senate, and subsequently defeated when the Mediation Committee failed to agree on a version of the bill within 30 days, in accordance with the provisions of Article 113, Clause 4 of the Constitution. This House resolves that the Division of Revenue Bill number 2, National Assembly Bill number 22 of 2017, be exempted from the provisions of Standing Order number 141, Clause 1, which provides that a bill, the second reading or third reading of which has been rejected, may be introduced again in the next session, or after the lapse of 6 months in the same session, but subject to fresh publication as provided in Standing Order number 114. Very well. So, the member for Tharaka Nithi. I put the question that given that the Division of Revenue Bill, National Assembly Bill number 2 of 2017 had been passed by the National Assembly, amended by the Senate, and subsequently defeated when the Mediation Committee failed to agree on a version of the bill within 30 days, in accordance with the provisions of Article 113, Clause 4 of the Constitution, this House resolves that the Division of Revenue Bill number 2, National Assembly Bill number 22 of 2017, be exempted from the provisions of Standing Order number 141, Clause 1, which provides that a bill, the second reading or third reading of which has been rejected, may be introduced again in the next session or after the lapse of 6 months in the same session, but subject to fresh publication as provided in Standing Order number 114. Will as many as that opinion say aye? Aye. As many as the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Order number 9, procedural motion, reduction of publication period of a bill.
Honorable Mtamsimi.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order 120 of this Honorable House, this House resolves to reduce the publication period of the Division of Revenue Bill number 2, Bill of National Assembly number 22 of 2017, from 14 days to 6 days. Mr. Speaker, the template is pretty much the same. We are seeking that this Honorable House agrees that we reduce the publication period as mentioned in the motion from 14 to 6 days. Mr. Speaker, the honorable members may recall that in the socio-economic audit, the report that is now the property of this House, it was mentioned that budget making would pose a challenge in an election year, and I think that's what we are dealing with now. And Mr. Speaker, I think in the last debate on this matter, I believe a week or so ago, I think the honorable members were very, very clear that the buck needs to stop somewhere. This idea of vacillating between the National Assembly and the Senate on matters as crucial as this, Mr. Speaker, is very, very unfortunate. And I'm not sure myself, with the greatest respect to the honorable judiciary, that the judges do not need to come back and review their ruling, because I think the idea that we share the same responsibilities in budget making between the National Assembly and the Senate is simply not true. This honorable House has bigger responsibilities, no disrespect to the Senate, and I think I hope that at some point that matter will be taken back to the courts so that we have a ruling that favors practicality and wisdom and reality and follows the general drift of the law and of the Constitution. The buck, Mr. Speaker, has got to stop somewhere, and I'm persuaded myself that that buck stops with this honorable chamber. I beg to move and request the Honorable Dr. Makali Mulu, member for Kitui Central, to kindly second.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to second the procedural motion, Mr. Speaker, relating to reduction of the application period of a bill from 14 days to 6 days. And Mr. Speaker, I can't agree more with my chairman, the chair, Budget and Appropriations Committee, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, now we all have the experience in terms of what is happening in budget making, and I think we need to be informed by this experience, Mr. Speaker, because we're having challenges when we have an important bill like this going to Senate and coming to the House. So we need to learn from the lessons learned, Mr. Speaker. And I think as a way forward, the 12th Parliament might need to look at that opinion. It was an opinion, but I think because of the good relationship between the two houses, we allowed the opinion to be kind of tested. We have gone through it and it's not working, Mr. Speaker. I think seriously we need to look on this matter and see how we can really move forward without any challenges. These are necessary handles being placed on Kenyans in terms of budget making. I do second, Mr. Speaker.
I propose the question that pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order number 120, this House resolves to reduce the publication period of the Division of Revenue Bill number 2, National Assembly Bill number 22 of 2017, from 14 days to 6 days. Looks like there's the whip says there's no mood. Honorable Mwadegu, you want to say something?
Mheshimiwa Spika, ukiangalia vile hali wabunge walivyo, hawana nia ya kuendelea na hoja kama hii. Najua hii hoja ni ya mbinu ambazo zinatakiwa kutumiwa, lakini Mheshimiwa Spika, wabunge wamechoka, wamelemewa, wanataka haya mambo yaishe, tuende tufanye mambo mengine. Lakini Mheshimiwa Spika, ukweli wa mambo ni kuwa hii hoja ya mbinu imeletwa hapa kwa kutokubaliana kwa kamati ile ambayo ilikuwa imeundwa, na inatuletea shida bure tu. Naomba Mheshimiwa Spika, tuangalie sheria zetu, kwa sababu hili bunge ndio linatakiwa kutatua hili tatizo. vile mwenyekiti amesema. Kwa hivyo tusianze kuzungushana merry go round kila pahali. Mheshimiwa Spika, naomba hivi tukubaliane, huu muda upunguzwe vile tulivyoomba. Tukishamalizana nao, ikileta shida hivyo tuje tuamue kwa hili bunge. Na labda Mheshimiwa Spika, wabunge lazima waweke sahihi kabisa kuwa hili bunge ndio linaheshimiwa na litoe mwelekeo kwa wenzao. Naomba kuunga mkono Mheshimiwa Spika.
Put the question.
Well spoken, Honorable Mwandegu, because of course it is everybody's knowledge that of course county governments can only proceed to prepare their budgets and respective appropriations laws on the basis of a Division of Revenue Act as per Article 224 of the Constitution. And therefore, what indeed the chairman and the secretary, as well as the Honorable Mwandegu, are saying is, indeed this House must rise to the occasion. One of these days, make a determination as to how we will need to proceed in the future, because it is not fair that we stifle the efforts of those that we represent in the grassroots and who are also represented as entities by the other house. Therefore, put the question that pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order number 120, this House resolves to reduce the publication period of the Division of Revenue number 2 bill, National Assembly Bill number 22 of 2017, from 14 days to 6 days. Will as many as that opinion say aye? Aye. As many of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Next. Order number 10, the Division of Revenue number 2 bill, National Assembly Bill number 22 of 2017, first reading. A bill for an act of parliament to provide for the equitable division of revenue raised nationally between the national and county governments in 2017-2018 financial year and for connected purposes. Order number 11, the President's Award National Assembly Bill number 7 of 2017, second reading. Question to be put.
Members, having confirmed that the House corrects, what remains for me is to put the question, which I hereby do, that the President's Award Bill, National Assembly Bill number 7 of 2017, be read a second time. As many as that opinion say aye, as many as the contrary opinion say nay. The ayes have it.
A bill for an act of parliament to provide for the conferring of awards to young persons, to provide for the establishment of the President's Award Board of Trustees and for connected purposes.
Next order.
Order number 12, the Legal Metrology Bill, National Assembly Bill number 8 of 2017, second reading.
This is a resumption of debate. Was there anybody? Honorable Kamama.
Thank you, the Speaker. The Speaker, before I contribute to this bill, I just wanted to inform the country and the Minister for Interior and National Coordination of National Government that a member of the County Assembly for Baringo, that is in my constituency, a member of County Assembly by the name Honorable Thomas Minito, was disappeared yesterday at around 1, and some some people who I think masqueraded as police officers got hold of him and demanded that they wanted him to give a statement. And up to now, we are working around the clock with the police and the Ministry of Interior to locate this politician. And so I want to call upon Kenyans, and especially the people in Rift Valley, to assist in locating this politician. And also wish to make an appeal to the police because of this season of politics, that politicians must be given sufficient security, because we've had kidnappings of aspirants like the one we had in Kiambu, in Limuru. And so we want politicians to be given maximum security. And I think the minister, as chair of Committee on Security, we have told the minister and the IG to take appropriate action to ensure that all politicians from both sides of the aisle are given proper protection. The Speaker, I wish to support the bill on the legal metrology bill, and I think if the House expedites its approval, I think this will assist us on the very many challenges that we face in the area of metrology. Mr. Speaker, I support.
Member for Umurwa Dikir. Absent, not desiring to be present, not wishing. Member for Matthias. Member for Matthias. Wish to contribute? No. Member for Baringo, Grace Kiptui. Wish to contribute to this? Legal meteorology.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will also note, before I contribute to the bill, wish to alert the country of the missing of that MCA that was referred by Honorable Kamama from Jura Maya Ward, going by the name Thomas Minito, who we were informed yesterday that he was picked by some two gentlemen who say that they were security officers and they wanted him to record a statement. My appeal goes to the Minister of Interior and National Security to team up with the technological team to try and trace this guy using maybe his telephone, because, Mr. Speaker, it is very serious that somebody is picked and he goes missing for more than 48 hours up to now. As for the bill, I support, Mr. Speaker, because this bill, if it is passed, it's going to help in the legal methodological and it's going to contribute a lot in our country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable members, looks like this bill has an interesting title that is, but if you read through it, you'll see it is not complicated, because other than just dealing with weights and measures, there are other terminologies that have come up, things like clouds. Maybe the Honorable Tichilo, if he was here, he would have been able to take you through. But if you read it, it's not a complicated bill. But is it the case that the members whose names appear here don't? Well, there being nobody else desirous of contributing, I call upon the mover to reply. Member for Umurwa Dikir indicated that he wasn't going to contribute to this. It is a legal metrology bill. Mover, Honorable Kato.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is a bill that has really attracted the least number of contributors. Only 3 members have contributed on it, the mover and the seconder, and Honorable Nicholas Gumbo being the third. And as you have said, it's not really a very complicated bill. It's just about weights and measures. This title called Metrology, people confuse it with weather forecast issues, but metrology, it's a science of measurement, Mr. Speaker. And if you look at it, actually, it is just pure physics. If even in the first part, where it's just the description as per the international standards of measurements, where you even talk of what is the unit of measurement on weight, which is the kilogram, for length, which is the meter, for time, which is the second, for electric current, which is the ampere, among others, Mr. Speaker. And so it's really meant to update the units of measurements in this country with respect to the international standard as per the International Bureau of Weights and Measures, Mr. Speaker, taking into cognizance the fact that we are in an era of technology, and therefore it's good to bring it to date with the technological aspect of weights and measures, Mr. Speaker. If you even look at what is happening right now in our infrastructure departments, especially when you talk of the energy sector, nowadays even the metering of the consumption of power in our houses is just metered in a way that you control using your own card, where when you input the amount of money you have, once you don't need to wait for an officer who reads the meters to show that you have consumed all your unit, Mr. Speaker. Even when you look at the credit card used in Mr. Speaker, my good colleague who at times presides the House, I didn't get it earlier, Mr. Speaker, because I cannot really refuse to donate a minute or two to the member for Luanda, but unfortunately, the rules, the standing orders is that once you start replying, it's now difficult unless with your permission, Mr. Speaker. Otherwise, he really wanted to say something. But Mr. Speaker, I just want to reply shortly by saying...
But if you are minded to donate, I will exercise my discretion.
Much obliged, Mr. Speaker.
Yes. Honorable Mulele.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to say something to this bill before we close this particular session to it. Mr. Speaker, this legal metrology bill, to me, is really a very important bill. And this is because this is a department of government that really deals with matters that do with measures and weighing and the weighting of things in this country. And it is a key department and a key act and bill in the business of trade in this country. And Mr. Speaker, in that bill, there are provisions that allow the inspectors of under this department to actually enter into premises, into private business premises, to inspect and even to seize machines and goods. And these are drastic powers that are actually being put in the hands of these officers. So the real need for me to speak to it, Mr. Speaker, was that we need the officers who are going to be so empowered, to be so well trained, because, Mr. Speaker, we know that the Constitution in this country protects private property. And sometimes the officers under the Department of Weights and Measures act on spurious complaints, and they go and destroy business. They go and destroy industry on very spurious claims by competitors, so that we do not want to have a situation where competitors actually will use this department of government to destroy the competition so that they remain alone in the field. So it is very important that as we pass this bill, we must also look at the requirement that the officers who are going to act under this act must be so well trained, and they must also know that they are acting in the interest of industry. They are acting in the interest of the state to enhance business, to afford the people who participate in business in this country an opportunity to trade rather than to be an impediment to business itself. So that is the contribution that I thought is very important for us to do, and they must act and use these powers in a way that will enhance trade and business in this country. Those are the contributions that I really needed to make, Mr. Speaker. And thank you for allowing me to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I really concur with the member for Luanda. Actually, on the importance of weight and measures is on trade, and that one is clearly on clause 30, where in clause 30, you have to get approval of all patterns of weighing or measuring equipment for trade. And this equipment should include the equipment to be used for trade in a country, for health, for safety, and for environmental measurements. Therefore, they are all enumerated actually on that thing, because on that clause 30, from subclause 1 to subclause 8, and because if you don't have standard units or equipment for weights and measures, then you will jeopardize your trading capabilities or capacity as a country. And then you look at clause 25. It is where you will get the offenses for sale of incorrect weighing and measuring equipment, Mr. Speaker. That's when you can curb this illegal trade, because illegal trade can happen in so many forms, even by using inappropriate weighing and measures, weight and measures equipment. So therefore, Mr. Speaker, without going much into the detail of it, I want to say it is a very important bill, and it has a lot of impacts on the trading aspect of this country. And therefore, the relevant committee of this House need to look into it before we go to the committee stage of it, such that they can fine-tune it if need be and bring the necessary amendments that will inform the up-to-date, up-to-technology, and up-to-standard. You see, Mr. Speaker, just the other day, we passed the bill on making Nairobi an international financial hub. And if we do not really tie it with the weights and measures, especially on the equipment required for purposes of trade, I think we will not be achieving much. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I beg to reply.
Other members, before I put the question, may I recognize the presence of students from Mara Academy Secondary School from Chepalungu constituency, Bomet County, in the public gallery. They are welcome to the proceedings. Honourable members, I therefore put the question, which is that the legal metrology bill, National Assembly Bill number 8 of 2017, be read a second time. As many as that opinion say aye, as many as contrary opinion say nay. The ayes have it.
A bill for an act of parliament to make provisions for the manufacture, sale, and use of weighing and measuring equipment in trade, health and safety, environment, and the sale of goods, to provide for international best practices and administration of legal metrology services in the devolved system of government and for connected purposes. Order number 13, the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill number 6, National Assembly Bill number 65 of 2015, second reading.
Honorable Kato.
Mr. Speaker, I seek for your indulgence that this bill be placed on the order paper of tomorrow, because actually, as we requested through a procedural motion yesterday to be placed on the order paper of today, we thought it's good for members to look into it, and we are in agreement that we debate it from tomorrow.
Very well, but I hope that there is a serious segment of this House, some of that working out, that have been very key, requiring that this law be passed. So I will accede to the request so that members can refresh their minds about this bill, which seeks to implement the principle of not more than 2/3 of either gender being represented in the National Assembly and in the Senate and other elective and appointive positions. I will expect, therefore, tomorrow that everybody will troop into the chamber in their droves to come and participate. If need be, some of you can begin now going to the various media houses to go and call all those that have problems sitting here for 30 minutes. I tell them tomorrow it is the bill is on. We are making efforts to comply with that constitutional requirement, and therefore I don't seem to see many of the people that usually agitate a lot, and it is really it's surprising. Either they don't read the order paper, and it is online, to know that this bill is coming up. So now from the chair, I inform them that it will be on the order paper tomorrow, Thursday, the 18th of May, so that they can now come and give the necessary input that is required. We'll move to the next. So the bill is taken out of the order paper for today to be put in tomorrow's order paper. Move to the next order.
Order number 14, motion, report of the Public Accounts Committee on the special audit of NYS accounts.
Chair of Public Accounts Committee, the Honorable Nicholas Gumbo, member for Arienda, currently desiring to vacate this house to do other duties elsewhere.
May it be so, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Public Accounts Committee, I wish to move that this House adopts the report of the Public Accounts Committee on the Special Audit Report of May 2016 on the accounts of the National Youth Service, NYS, volumes 1 and 2, which report was laid on the table of the House on Thursday, March 16, 2017. Mr. Speaker, sir, in one of our famous quotes, the famous former British Prime Minister, Dame Margaret Thatcher, had this to say about public funds in a speech read to the Conservative Party conference on October 14, 1983. And I quote, Mr. Speaker, "One of the great debates of our time is about how much of your money should be spent by state and how much you should keep to spend on your family. Let us never forget this fundamental truth. The state has no source of money other than money which people earn themselves. If the state wishes to spend more than it can do, it can do so only by borrowing your savings or by taxing you more. It is no good thinking that someone else will pay. That someone else, quote unquote, is you. There is no such thing as public money. There is only taxpayers' money, end of quote." Mr. Speaker, sir, the Public Accounts Committee derives its mandate from the Standing Order number 205-2 of the National Assembly, which provides that the Public Accounts Committee, PSC, shall be responsible for the examination of the accounts showing the appropriations of the sum voted by the House to meet the public expenditure and of such other accounts laid before the Houses as the committee may deem fit. The primary mandate of PSC, therefore, is to oversee the expenditure of public funds by ministries, departments, constitutional commissions, and independent offices to ensure value for money, optimal application of public funds, and adherence to government financial regulations and procedures. The committee executes its mandate on the basis of annual and special audit reports such as this one, prepared by the Office of the Auditor General. The legal foundations and principles. In the execution of its mandate aforestated, PSC is guided by core constitutional and institutional principles on public finance management, as well as established parliamentary customs, traditions, practices, and usages. These principles include the following. 1, Article 201 of the Constitution enacts fundamental principles that shall guide all aspects of public finance in the Republic. The principles are: there shall be openness and accountability, including public participation in all financial matters. B, the public finance system shall promote an equitable society, and in particular, the burden of taxation shall be shared fairly, and 2, revenue raised nationally shall be shared equitably among national and county governments, and 3, expenditure shall promote the equitable development of the country, including by making special provision for marginalized groups and areas, and C, the burdens and benefits of the use of resources and public borrowing shall be shared equitably between the present and future generations. D, public money shall be used in a prudent and responsible way, and finally E, financial management shall be responsible and fiscal reporting shall be clear. Direct personal liability. Article 2265 of the Constitution provides that if the holder of a public office, including a political office, directs or approves the use of public funds contrary to law or instructions, the person is liable for any loss arising therefrom, arising from that use, and shall make good the loss, whether the person remains the holder of that office or not. Mr. Speaker, the Public Accounts Committee considers this constitutional provision as the basis for holding each individual accounting officer and other public officers directly and personally liable for any loss of public funds under their watch. The committee has and will continue to invoke this provision in its recommendations to hold those responsible personally accountable. This is especially so because, as is detailed in this report, Mr. Speaker, the process of procurement to the use of IFMIS for payment process involves actions of several officers. Mr. Speaker, on the obligations of cabinet secretaries, the committee noted that the enhanced role of cabinet secretaries exceeding the traditional policy oversight and direction functions. The 11th cabinet meeting held on 2nd December 2014 at State House, Nairobi, empowered cabinet secretary vastly. They were given powers of oversight in sanctioning procurements in ministries, departments, and agencies, formerly a preserve of principal secretaries. They would also approve work, procurement, and cash flow plans. Article 73(1)(a), 3, and 4 of the Constitution is also expressed that authority assigned to a state officer is a public trust to be exercised in a manner that 3, brings honor to the nation and dignity to the office, and 4, promotes public confidence and in the integrity of the office. Mr. Speaker, the committee knows that this is an express provision that empowers cabinet secretaries to be fully in charge of operations in their ministries. On top of this, Mr. Speaker, the Public Service Commission delegated human resource functions to cabinet secretaries on 5th January 2015. This was meant to enhance efficiency, effectiveness, and accountability. Cabinet secretaries, Mr. Speaker, can no longer feign ignorance on day-to-day operations in their dockets. Obligations of accounting officers. Mr. Speaker, Section 68(1) of the Public Finance Management Act 2012 provides inter alia that an accounting officer for a national government entity, Parliamentary Service Commission, and the judiciary shall be accountable to the National Assembly for ensuring that resources of the respective entity for which he or she is the accounting officer are used in a way that is lawful and authorized, and effective, efficient, economical, and transparent. This provision, Mr. Speaker, obligates all accounting officers to appear before the Public Accounts Committee of the National Assembly to respond to audit queries in their respective ministries, departments, and agencies. In addition, Mr. Speaker, Section 74(2) of the same Public Finance Management Act 2012 stipulates as follows, that if a cabinet secretary reasonably believes that an accounting officer is engaging in or has engaged in improper conduct within the meaning of subsection 4, the cabinet secretary, Mr. Speaker, shall, and the operating word here is shall, take such measures as may be provided for in regulations or refer the matter to the relevant office or body in terms of the statutory and other conditions of appointment or employment applicable to that accounting officer. Mr. Speaker, sir, this section therefore empowers the appointing authority to discipline errant accounting officers, which it could include, among other things, revoking the appointment. These provisions seal a long-standing loophole that has previously seen accounting officers continuously commit or preside over fiscal indiscipline and malpractices in their ministries with impunity without sanctions. Mr. Speaker, on the obligations of holders of authority to incur expenditure, that is the AIE, this, to facilitate day-to-day running of ministries, departments, and agencies, the public finance regulations accord accounting officers power to incur expenditure on their behalf in a manner that is lawful and within limits. The accounting officer still retains responsibility for the expenditure of the vote. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Public Accounts Committee applied varied sections of other relevant laws to cover the whole spectrum of the matter at hand. These include, but not limited to, the following: the Banking Act 1989 with subsequent amendments, the Central Bank of Kenya Act with subsequent amendments, the Public Procurement and Disposal Act of 2005, the Public Procurement Regulations 2006, the Process of Crime and Anti-Money Laundering Act 2009, popularly known as the Procamla Law, 6, the National Youth Service Act, 7, the National Assembly Standing Orders, and 8, the Constitution of Kenya 2010. Mr. Speaker, the Public Accounts Committee strongly holds the view that these provisions of the law were intended to be fully applied to give effect to the high principles in Article 201 of the Constitution stated herein above, to ensure prudent and responsible use and safeguard of public funds. The committee has accordingly applied these provisions to recommend diverse recommendations, investigations, and surcharging of various persons found to bear responsibility for breaches of the law and or responsible for the loss or wastage of public funds. Mr. Speaker, the executive summary of the report. The committee in its own motion requested for a special audit of the books of accounts of the National Youth Service and the Ministry of Devolution and Planning from 2013 to date, once the scandal came to public light. The Auditor General's report provided a basis for the committee's investigation, and it revealed massive fraudulent activities, including the loss of Kenya shillings 791,385,000, a further Kenya shillings 609,252,750 and 60 cents, and an attempted theft of Kenya shillings 695,400,000, among other irregularities. On further investigations, Mr. Speaker, undertaken by the committee called for submissions from both the Permanent Secretary, Public Service and Youth Affairs, and the Director of ISMIT, which revealed that the sum in question, which may have been misappropriated and needs to be further investigated by both the Director of Criminal Investigations and the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, may have been to the tune of Kenya shillings 23 billion for the entire ministry, of which slightly over 10 billion is directly traceable to the operations of the National Youth Service. Mr. Speaker, see the attached schedules. During investigations, Mr. Speaker, the committee interviewed several witnesses, including the then officers of the Ministry and the National Youth Service, current officials, business persons, and persons of interest deemed to have information relevant to the inquiry. These interrogations unearthed even worse fraudulent activities, with clear indications that procurement at the National Youth Service was driven by patronage and cronyism. The committee has reason to believe a huge part of the ministry National Youth Service development budget was misused, and recommends a detailed forensic audit of the entire budget of the ministry and the National Youth Service from 2013 to 2016. committee identified the theft as a well-orchestrated scheme starting from the exponential increase of the ministry's budget without absorption capacity, ascertained without the deployment and without ascertained, the deployment of Mr. Adan Gedo Harake to the National Youth Service to a non-existent title of Senior Deputy Director General to oversee all operational matters. This led to a vicious tug-of-war between the old networks and the newly installed cartel, leading to exposure of the scandal. Mr. Speaker, in his famous book, Think and Grow Rich, the famous American author and motivator, Napoleon Hill, had this to say about human beings. It says, Mr. Speaker, and I quote, "Man with his superior sense of intuition, with the capacity to think and to reason, does not eat his fellow man bodily. He gets more satisfaction out of, quote unquote, eating him financially. Man is so avaricious that every conceivable law has been passed to safeguard him from his fellow man," end of quote. So eager is a man to possess wealth that he will acquire it in whatever manner he can, through legal methods if possible, through other methods if necessary or expedient. Mr. Speaker, in one of her famous quotes, the late British Prime Minister, Dame Margaret Thatcher, had this to say, "Being powerful is like a lady. If you have to tell people you are, then you are not," end of quote. The committee finds that the then Cabinet Secretary, Ms. Anne Mumbe Waiguru, was the driving force behind both policy and operations by micromanaging implementation of 5-point vision plan at the National Youth Service. The committee finds that the then Principal Secretary, Engineer Peter Oganga Mangiti, is responsible for the loss of public funds. The committee apportions responsibility to individuals at the Ministry and the NYS as per Article 2265 of the Constitution, which has been cited herein above. Those found guilty are recommended for barring from holding public office and all specific punitive sanctions. Business persons were used in the scheme led by Ms. Josephine Kavura Irungu and Mr. Benson Gethi Wangoi, with a complicit financial system aiding money laundering. The committee recommends prosecution of the individuals, blacklisting of the firms, as well as proposals for financial institutions to strengthen the law to see loopholes with the which aid money laundering. Mr. Speaker, the committee further recommends investigations of the relationship between the directors of certain companies with public officials at the ministry, and the National Youth Service, including thorough audit of their lifestyles. Mr. Speaker, further, the committee makes the following recommendations. 1, that the judiciary expedites prosecution of criminal case CMC, Court CRC number 1905/2015, Republic versus Peter Mangiti and 24 others, charge sheet annexed to this report as Appendix 4. The committee recommends that Engineer Mangiti be barred from holding public office if found guilty after due process. 2, the judiciary expedites proceedings of money laundering case number 301/206, Republic versus Josephine Kavura Irungu and 10 others, charge sheet annexed to this report as Appendix 5. 3, the Directorate of Criminal Investigations, DCI, and Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, EACC, conduct thorough investigations into all payments made through IFMIS from the Ministry of Devolution and Planning, including the National Youth Service, over the audit period amounting to Kenya shillings 23 billion, to establish 1, the names of the directors, proprietors, and all companies' business which receive these payments. 2, whether they, the directors, proprietors, had any relations with senior ministry / National Youth Service officials. 3, names of the banks into which payments were made, including names of signatories to each of the accounts. 4, names of all the end recipients of funds from these accounts. 5, the procurement process leading to the award of these contracts, and or whether any contract agreements were signed prior to the commencement of the works services. Costs of such contracts agreements should be availed for scrutiny. 6, whether local purchase orders, local service orders were issued prior to award of these contracts. 7, whether actual goods and services were delivered prior to payments being made, including a demand for presentation of authenticated signed stamped delivery notes, inspection and acceptance reports. 8, whether the Kenya Revenue Authority received the due portions of taxes from the payments on the purported goods and services delivered over this period from the individual firms and recipients of the funds. Where due taxes were not paid, the Kenya Revenue Authority immediately commences the recovery process, complete with applicable penalties. Number 4, Ms. Ann Mumbi-Waiguru, the former cabinet secretary in the Ministry of Devolution and Planning, be barred from holding public office if found guilty after due process in light of her overall leadership at the ministry. 4A, contravention of Chapter 6 of the Constitution in its entirety, but more specifically Article 73, which provides that a state officer must bring honor to the nation and dignity to the office and promote public confidence in the integrity of the office, and be aware of the existence of a cabinet resolution on the enhanced functions of the cabinet secretary as resolved via the resolution of 11th cabinet meeting held on 2nd December 2014. She failed to execute the said enhancement functions. 5, the Directorate of Criminal Investigations commences fresh investigation of abuse of office by Ms. Ann Mumbi-Waiguru, former CS Minister of Devolution and Planning. The findings to be made public and appropriate action be taken against her if found culpable. Number 6, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission conducts a thorough lifestyle audit of top officials of the Ministry of Devolution and Planning and the National Youth Service, including the then Cabinet Secretary, Madam Ann Waiguru, spanning the last 5 years, 2012 to 2016. The outcome of this audit should be made public by 31st December 2017, with criminal proceedings instituted against those found culpable. Number 7, the Directorate of Criminal Investigations and the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission to conduct thorough investigations with a view to establishing whether the Governor of the Central Bank of Kenya, Dr. Patrick Ngugi Njoroge, should be charged with abuse of office for abetting the theft of funds of the Ministry of Devolution and Planning and the National Youth Service for failing, refusing to advise the government on the abnormal payment requisitions from the Ministry and the National Youth Service as per sections 4A1E, 44.1 and 44.2 of the Central Bank of Kenya Act. Number 8, the Director of Public Prosecutions, DPP, immediately reviews the decision not to charge Mr. Adan Gedo Harake of attempted theft of Kenya shillings 695,400,000 in light of the fact that no evidence of his password having been stolen was forwarded during the investigations. The Director of Public Prosecution should further institute charges against him for his role in approving a duplicate payment of Kenya shillings 12.5 million to the Consulting House Limited and for lying under oath over the purported theft of his password and his academic qualifications. Number 9, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission and the Directorate of Criminal Investigations seduced investigations into the conduct of various public officers who made the diverse approvals into the IFMIS system for various payments to companies associated with Ms. Josephine Kavura Irungu and others without due diligence as noted under observation, paragraph number 51. 10, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission and the Directorate of Criminal Investigation expeditiously carry out investigations on the members of the Ministerial Tender Committee as listed in observations, paragraph number 53, with a view to referring the cases to the Directorate of Public Prosecutions for appropriate action. Number 11, the Directorate of Criminal Investigations and the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission immediately commences investigations into the role of the Central Bank of Kenya, with particular focus on the Directors of Banking Services and Banking Supervision Directorate and the Financial Reporting Center, with a view to charging them with contravening, the Proceeds of Crime and Anti-Money Laundering Act, Proclamla Law of 2009, for aiding and abetting money laundering. The committee further directs that investigations be conducted to establish whether there was any complicity on the part of the Central Bank of Kenya and or any of its members of staff in aiding and abetting the theft of public funds at the NYS and the Ministry of Devolution and Planning. 12, the Directorate of Public Prosecution should immediately prefer charges of aiding and abetting money laundering on the partners of the following law firms: Gitonga Advocates, Ogola and Mujera and Company Advocates, and Singoei, Murkomen and Sigei Advocates. 13, the Directorate of Criminal Investigations commences investigations into the conduct of Mr. Hilary Sigei, the managing partner of Singoei, Murkomen and Sigei Advocates, with a view to instituting criminal charges against him for the withdrawal and use of Kenya shillings 500,000, being proceeds of crime from the firm's client's account for its personal benefit. Number 14, the Directorate of Criminal Investigations should launch investigation into the circumstances under which the Consulting House Limited and its directors, in collusion with officers of the National Youth Service, were paid Kenya shillings 12.5 million in excess of the contract sum during the implementation of the NYS 5-point vision rebranding contract, and institute charges on the firm's directors for perjury and handling stolen funds. Further, the directors of the Consulting House Limited should be investigated to establish the circumstances under which they received funds in excess of Kenya shillings 100 million from the ministry and the service over the audit period. Should the investigations establish that these funds were irregularly acquired, recovery measures should be instituted against the directors individually, in addition to appropriate charges being preferred against them. 15, the judiciary expedites cases against Family Bank and its former employees already before court. 16, both the Directorate of Criminal Investigation and Ethics and the Crime Commission conducts the detailed forensic investigations on the following financial institutions that receives funds from the Ministry and or the NYS to ascertain compliance with the Banking Act and Procamla law, and take appropriate action on those institutions found culpable for flouting the law, namely African Banking Corporation Kenya Limited, Bank of Africa Limited, Bank of Baroda Limited, Barclays Bank of Kenya Limited, Commercial Bank of Kenya Limited, Commercial Bank of Kenya Commercial Bank Limited, Central Bank of Kenya Limited, CFC Stanbic Kenya Limited, Chase Bank Limited, Consolidated Bank Limited, the Cooperative Bank of Kenya Limited, Credit Bank Limited, Diamond Trust Bank Limited, Eco Bank Limited, Equity Bank Limited, First Community Bank Limited, Gyro Commercial Bank Limited, Guaranteed Trust Bank Limited, Gulf African Bank Limited, Housing Finance Bank Limited, I&M Bank Limited, Jamii Bora Bank Limited, the Kenya Commercial Bank Limited, Commercial Bank of Africa Limited, National Bank of Kenya, NIC Bank Limited, Paramount Investment Bank Limited, Cedian Bank Limited, Standard Chartered Bank Kenya Limited, Transnational Bank Limited, Faulu Microfinance Limited, All Mutual Kenya Limited. 17, pursuant to the provisions of Article 229, 5 and 6 of the Constitution, and 229, 5 and 6 of the Constitution, and Section 32 and 49 of the Public Audit Act 2015, the Auditor General conducts a complete and thorough forensic audit of the Ministry of Devolution and Planning and all the agencies and the departments' development budgets for the period 2013-2016, and report to the House by 31st December 2017. 18, the Public Service Commission immediately reviews all the disciplinary cases brought upon the person of Mr. Adan Gedo Harake and takes appropriate and satisfactory action. In the same breath, the Commission for University Education should immediately investigate the authenticity of academic qualifications held by Mr. Adan Gedo Harake and take appropriate disciplinary action against Mr. Adan Harake should he be found to have been promoted based on fake/falsified qualifications. Number 19 is a list, Mr. Speaker, of companies which transacted, a list of about 200 companies which transacted, which is in the report, and we are recommending that the EACC and the DCI immediately probes the relationship between the directors of the following companies with top officials at the Ministry and the National Youth Service, the procurement process leading to award of contracts and appropriate charges of completion instituted, if any, on these companies, Mr. Speaker. These companies are listed, and these companies, Mr. Speaker, number up to about over 100 companies, Mr. Speaker, and they are listed in the report. Number 20, the Director of Public Prosecutions commences investigation into the conduct of Mr. Jefta Kiplimo Rugut with a view to instituting abuse of office proceedings against him for recommending direct procurement of the Consulting House Limited Contract Section 74 of the Public Procurement and Disposal Act 21. The government blacklists Mr. Benson Gethi Wangoi and Mrs. Josephine Kavura Irungu and the associated companies and or firms and other firms or companies and the individual directors found guilty of malpractice at the Ministry of Devolution and Planning and or the National Youth Service from engaging in further business dealings with any of the public entity. 22, the Kenya Revenue Authority immediately reviews tax returns by the companies held by Ms. Josephine Kavura Irungu and Mr. Benson Gethi Wangoi and other listed individuals and companies who secured contracts with the Ministry of Devolution and Planning and the NYS with a view to recovering all tax and outstanding all outstanding and due taxes from the awarded tenders. 23, the National Assembly prioritizes and considers for adoption the recommendations contained in the report on the IFMIS effectiveness audit report for the period July 2010 to 2015, presented to the House on 1st December 2016 by the Auditor General. 24, Parliament proceeds to immediately review and subsequently amend the Banking Act and other financial laws and regulations with a view to realizing the following. 1, Roman 1, substantial increase the maximum fine levied by Central Bank of Kenya on non-compliant banks and financial institutions. 2, converting Financial Reporting Center into an autonomous body with operational independence from the Central Bank of Kenya. Roman 3, delegating the authority to order the preservation of suspected proceeds of crime to the Financial Reporting Center subject to judicial review. Roman 4, express recognition of the Central Bank of Kenya as one of the reporting institutions under PROCAMLA. Roman 5, reporting obligations including guidelines of due diligence and know your customer principles to include law firms, estate agents, registered car dealers, and other professional firms, stroke service providers dealing in both movable and immovable assets. 25, the National Treasury should develop regulations on a percentile cap on which financial year budgets of NBS cannot be surpassed in succeeding years to guard against non-absorption and misuse of public funds. Within this framework, the National Treasury and the National Assembly are urged to thoroughly scrutinize previous financial year absorption rates and prevailing and future absorption capacities of ministries, departments, and agencies, especially on substantial increases in the budget allocation. Mr. Speaker, I want to emphasize on this recommendation number 25. One of the committee felt that one of the reasons this scandal was so easy to commit and execute was because the NYS, through the Ministry of Planning and Devolution, was given budgetary allocation. The increment in budgetary allocations was far in excess of its ability to absorb them. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, we were of the opinion that had more scrutiny been put into looking at these budgetary increments, especially comparing to previous years' budgetary allocations, perhaps it would have been possible to give allocations that were in accordance with the capacity of the NYS and the Ministry of Devolution to absorb, and hence it may have been possible, Mr. Speaker, to have the effect of this fraud at the Ministry and the service could have been lessened, if not eliminated. 26, the National Treasury immediately revamps the internal audit functions in ministries, departments, and agencies to make it proactive and effective, including staffing. 27, the Auditor General immediately conducts a detailed forensic review of all payments made to youth cohorts using mobile money transfer with a view to recommended prosecution on individual funds who abused the cohort payment system for personal aggrandizement and gain. Number 28, the Accounting Officer, Ministry of Devolution and Planning immediately recovers the full amount of Kenya shillings 360,315 paid to permanent staff at the National Youth Service alongside cohorts. 29, the State Department for Irrigation makes public the list and locations of all water ponds and dams constructed in the country under the NYS program. The ministry should further complete any stalled projects and develop a clear criteria for identification and distribution of such projects in the future. Number 30, the Director of Public Prosecution should commence investigations into abuse of office on officers who authorized opening of bank accounts without the National Treasury approvals, contrary to Section 28(1) of the PFM Act 2012. Mr. Speaker, sir, as I conclude, I want to state that the committee was also alive to attempts to derail it from attaining its mandate. Political interference manifested itself severally, with political pronouncements and the substantiated claims being made against the committee and its members. The committee overall stayed true to its calling and responsibility and has produced this report that it believes has already had impact by prosecution of key suspects and the scope and the scope by investigatory agencies widened. The committee will forever be guided by its mantra and beyond reproach. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, I wish to the committee wishes to register its copious appreciation to the office of the Speaker, the Clerk of the National Assembly, the Auditor General, the Treasury, and the witnesses who dutifully honored invitations to appear and make satisfactory submissions before the committee. Special mention goes to the Secretariat of the committee, who have time and again gone beyond the call of normal duty to produce this report. Mr. Speaker, the commitment and devotion to duty of all those involved in this noble task made the work of the committee and production of this report a success. We thank each one of them most profusely. Mr. Speaker, sir, on behalf of the members of the Public Accounts Committee and pursuant to Standing Order number 1996, it is now my distinguished honor and privilege to present the report of the Public Accounts Committee on its recommendations of the Special Audit Report on the accounts of the National Youth Service for deliberation, Mr. Speaker, and adoption by the House. Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to move, and I ask the Honorable Member for Tongaren, Dr. Iseli Simiyu, to second.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to second this report of the Public Accounts Committee, perhaps, Mr. Speaker, by making a quote from the chair from the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, that man with his superior sense of intuition, with the capacity to think and to reason, does not eat his fellow man bodily. He gets more satisfaction out of eating him financially. Man is so avaricious that every conceivable law has been passed to safeguard him from his fellow man. So eager is man to possess wealth that he will acquire it in whatever manner he can, through legal methods if possible, through other methods if necessary or expedient. Mr. Speaker, as I sat there during the investigation, I felt very sad. I realized that as Kenyans, we have totally lost track, lost direction. Mr. Speaker, during the colonial time, people used to steal from the colonial government and perhaps mess up things belonging to the colonial government, and they were justified because we were fighting for our independence. But that mentality never ended. We have continued stealing from the government, believing that it's government money. But this is actually Kenyans' money. This is actually taxpayers' money. So we are virtually stealing from ourselves. And hence, it has become so bad that as we try to develop a democracy, we have actually ended up developing a plutocracy. It is getting to a point where you start wondering whether we are really serious in trying to curb the high levels of corruption. It is so bad that even now, the Auditor General is under siege for trying to uncover all this stuff. It has reached a point where in Kenya, if you are not involved in corruption, you are an aberration. You actually stand out like a sore thumb for trying to be clean. In fact, it has reached a point where if you try to be clean, you will actually be laughed at, you'll actually be laughed out of town. You'll actually be looked at like somebody who has lost his mind, that you are not doing what everybody else is doing. It has become a norm rather than an exception. And we cannot run a country that way. Mr. Speaker, Article 2265 of the Constitution reads very clearly, if the holder of a public office, including a political office, directs or approves the use of public funds contrary to law or instructions, the person is liable for any loss arising from that use and shall make good the loss, whether the person remains the holder of the office or not. Mr. Speaker, none of that has ever been enforced. Hence, public officers continue mismanaging our resources. In an attempt to control the problem, a circular was issued on 2nd December 2014 at State House, giving the cabinet secretaries immense powers to be able to control what goes on in their various respective ministries. However, Mr. Speaker, up to date, if a CS is caught in such a situation, he or she will still want to pass the buck to the principal secretary as the accounting officer. Yet we are well aware that such a circular exists and immense powers were given to cabinet secretaries. So any cabinet secretary who tries to pass the buck knows exactly what they are doing, trying to cover up for whatever ills that they might have committed. When I look at the famine ravaging Kenya, and I look at the colossal sums that were misappropriated here, it becomes, I think, a disease. Because, Mr. Speaker, when we first started the investigation, we were thinking of 675 million shillings, but as we went on, it kept on ballooning to the extent that that investigation was way beyond the ability of the committee to accomplish completely. That's why in our recommendations, we have asked for further, more drastic investigations, because by the look of things, what might have been lost is 23 billion shillings. Mr. Speaker, that's a lot of money. Counties would have done well with some of that money, but then this misappropriation has also permeated down to the counties. It's very sad, Mr. Speaker, that such a thing could be allowed to happen. But it was well orchestrated. It was well thought out. When you look at how one Adan Harake was fast-tracked into the National Youth Service, and you look at the past records of this officer, then you realize that he was a special purpose vehicle sent to NYS to accomplish certain things. And this is some of the things that he accomplished. I think the problem with NYS was that as it was being controlled, somebody had already set it up as a milk cow, such that supplementary budgets were requested specifically for eating, if I might say so. Supplementary budgets were requested specifically for eating, and the system had been well set out. In fact, at the look of things, even that Ben Kethi and Kabura were just fronts. But when you look at the confidence that they appeared before the committee with, it tells you that actually they felt well protected. They felt well protected. That's why they had that confidence to mislead the committee and at times to answer questions in such a brazen manner, like carrying money in sacks from a bank. Casually. Because these people felt well protected, because they are not the exact masterminds, but they were just what you call proxies, fronts for higher-ups who are doing this work. Mr. Speaker, it's not possible as a parliament to effectively unearth this. In fact, under the circumstances, I believe the agencies responsible for this, the officers in those agencies should actually have resigned for failing to do their duties. But they didn't resign. So are they complicit? Are they part of the web? Because they've totally failed. Even the few people they are prosecuting are just a tip of the iceberg. Because as you look at our report of the plutocracy that was involved here, you'll find that there's a whole list. Almost every bank in this country was involved. You find companies that might have been involved, which are numerous in number. And some of them have very interesting names, which just shows how hurriedly they were set up. Mr. Speaker, this scam perhaps is one of the largest from any single ministry to hit this country, especially with money voted for by this parliament. And I think this parliament also stands indicted why we approve huge allocations to ministries that don't have the capacity to absorb. And actually, history bears me out, because when you remember the investigation on the judiciary, they were allocated a lot of money suddenly and they could not absorb it, so they ran helter-skelter trying to finish whatever they had been allocated, and in the process misappropriated a lot of money. The same thing has happened to the Ministry of Devolution and National Youth Service. They suddenly end up with a huge amount of money, which they feel that they must spend to show that they are working. And in the process, they call their cronies and they start misappropriating the money in what I would call crony capitalism, the worst form of crony capitalism ever exhibited anywhere on this earth. Mr. Speaker, it's very sad that this country, working very hard to industrialize, working very hard to develop, can actually allow such a scam to happen. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, initially when the scam hit the media, the first instinct was to cover up, and that went on for quite some time. Then the next instinct was to vilify the committee as this was going on. Mr. Speaker, the agencies, Directorate, the CID, the Anti-Banking Fraud Unit, the Office of the ESCC, I think have failed Kenyans on this matter, because this scam is so huge, and I'm sure they have all the instruments to be able to unearth the masterminds, because I believe the masterminds were very, very powerful indeed, and probably are still very powerful. That's why people are scared to come out clearly and say that so-and-so directed this and that. Instead, they send us small fry like Kabura with her money in sacks, and
what?
Second.
I propose the question, which is that this House adopts a report of the Public Accounts Committee on the Special Audit Reports of May 2016 on the accounts of the National Youth Service, in bracket NYS, volumes 1 and 2, laid on the table of the House on Thursday, March 16th, 2017. Honorable Jackson Robb.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to contribute to this motion. As the Vice Chair Public Accounts Committee, I expected the Chairman to give me the opportunity to second, but nonetheless, I want to thank Honorable Seli for well elaborating on the issues that we really went through when we were interrogating the witnesses that appeared before us. Honorable Speaker, I want to say this report is one of the reports that has really, it's already in public domain, and somehow it has made some of us to make more enemies than friends. For your information, I think I was defeated because of this report in the just ended nominations, because somewhere I must have stepped on some individuals who were mentioned in this report. Nonetheless, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that as indicated by the chair and seconder, this NYS saga was really a well-designed, well-orchestrated kind of expenditure, because trying to investigate and to find out who really did what was a real big problem. We were sent young men, boys and girls who could brag around that, you know, were it not for the issues that came up, I could be a millionaire. 50 million shillings would be in my pocket right now, or even 500 million shillings is a business that is readily available out there. And really we have discovered as a committee that government expenditures are not properly utilized, not properly used for the intended purposes. This country will cry forever when we have sharks manning our resources, when we have people who doesn't care what the public are saying and start thinking of how he's going to be wealthy by the time he's exiting that seat. Honorable Speaker, We realized this even when we came up with the judiciary report, and that has been elaborated very well by Honorable Dr. Eseli, that these departments or ministries that come up with sudden huge budgets must be thoroughly investigated, because in the long run, they might not have the capacity, they might not have the plans to utilize the funds that they have sourced for. Therefore, they will go into mass wasting of those resources, because the issue of saying we must spend what has been allocated to us really does not help. Spending does not mean that we must exhaust everything to show that the ministry is operating. But we can have the budget and do it on tangible projects that will be seen, and surely we'll know that ministry has spent the money that far. But spending all the 23 billion and trying to realize what you've done, there is nothing. Money went to people's pockets. Really, I think this country is going into the hands of, it's going to the dogs. Because when I saw the 5-point vision program for the NYS, it was well intended. The vision had 5 issues that they wanted to do: the paramilitary training and service recommendation, national service youth and re-socialization, social transformation and vocational training, enterprise and youth economy, bankable institutional architecture. So all these 5-point vision were a well-intended vision. If implemented, I think we could have done around this country. But getting the money and taking the money to other purposes that were never intended for has caused what we are now talking about in NYS. Because I remember we had boys in NYS doing the training. They could write to me, they could ask me, Mheshimiwa, we are suffering, we have no food. Please send me something small. Yet when we were doing the investigation, you could see farms that were paid millions of shillings, running into 300, 400 million to a farm for supply of food. Yet not even a particle was received in these training camps, causing our children to suffer, making people to think that this government has no money, yet the allocations were there. So really, I don't know what will happen to Kenyans. Patriotism is no more. So that those who get the opportunity, today NASA is fighting to move in, to take the next government if they will. But they are not even moving in there to come and help this country. They want to say, this is our time to eat. When are we really going to change? When are we really going to change and say we want to render services to our people? No, I don't want to cross over. I'm saying let us have people with good intentions that will help this country, turn around this country, turn around the economy of this country. We have a budget of 2.something trillion now. But what does it translate to? Our people are languishing in poverty. Boys are out there unemployed. We are suffering. Food prices are all over. The country is suffering. Yet we have a budget of 2.3 trillion. Really, I want to say this country must do something. Those who are in leadership must do something. So, Mr. Speaker, looking at the report, we realized that there was total disregard to the procurement laws or procurement procedures and even the PFM Act rules and regulations, so that they could circumvent the procurement procedures by rushing to supplies branch, pretend to have some material that can easily be sourced through supplies branch, and then make sure these farms, in fact the farms that they used, they were not even companies, they were not registered companies, they were just farms, business farms. So they could move in, make those farms to appear as a list of tenderers that have been pre-qualified in the supplies branch, so that they can use to source the material. The 791, 385 million went like that. 3 farms from one individual benefited from the fund. And these business firms were just scooping the maram. The vehicles, the transport was from NYS. So you've given somebody a tender to supply maram, yet the scooping machines, the transporting machines are the government machines. And these farms are paid a cool 791 million to take home. Really, we muffled because these were outright theft. To me, these were outright theft, well planned by not the small men and women, by the big fishes. And we are saying the executive interference in the NYS caused all this saga that we are seeing today. The CS could order everybody left, right, and center. This is what is in this report. The witnesses have written that the CS could instruct by phone that you do this or you go. So a small man will want to survive. He has children and people to take care of. So if a boss has instructed you to do, you have to do it. So this ended up in wasting all those resources. We also discovered that the tenders that were awarded, somebody could get, if you have been given a tender of 20 million, for example, they could easily add a zero to make it 200 million. So there were a lot of fraudulent issues, both from the department to the IFMIS department in Treasury, where they could make changes, they could manipulate the figures to look like this tender was awarded this much. Yet, in reality, when they went, because it is in the report of the CID, when the CID carried out the investigation, they discovered that they were adding zeros. They were manipulating the figures to, to make the figures big and earn whatever they wanted to earn. Mr. Speaker, there were also issues of overpayment. A firm like the consulting house was overpaid a whooping 12.5 million. Of course, later on when he appeared before us, he accepted and he said he was going to refund. I believe he has done the refund. But this was a well-intended or well-programmed issue. They were using one invoice twice to make payments. So I don't know who took the 12.5 million. The owner could have been paid the first 12.5, and then this other 12.5 was pocketed by a few individuals. So really, there was an outright theft in NYS. Mr. Speaker, something has to be done in this country, and I will never be ashamed to say that Kenya is a well-endowed country. We have enough resources. It is the way we utilize our resources that is killing this country. If we were to use the resources for the intended purposes, if we were to implement our budgets for the purposes they were budgeted for, this country could be very farther than those other Malays.
Member for Mataos. Member Geoffrey Odanga is not there, but his name appears here. The next one again, and I know where he normally sits, the member for Umurwa Dikir. His name appears, is he here? He's no, I don't know what it is, they are manipulating the machines. Now the names appear. Obviously, this member is present. Member for Ugunja.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, firstly, I want to say that the Public Accounts Committee report is a good piece of literature. I'm saying it's a good piece of literature in the sense that Kenyans who have suffered the brunt of this wanton theft have not found an answer in that report. Kenyans who continue to wallow in poverty have not found an answer in that report. And I can't blame the committee, because obviously the committee has got limited capacity to unearth the kind of theft that was going on in the NYS. What Kenyans would have wanted to see, the situation where the thieves the real thieves are pinpointed. That so and so was the mastermind, so and so stole what, and therefore we recommend that such and such action be taken against them. What we have seen is a prevarication, of course, given the circumstances. But, Mr. Speaker, if this House can remember, I think it was sometime in the year 2015 when I did raise an issue through the Committee on Finance. And the then Cabinet Secretary, Ms. Anne Waiguru, was summoned before that said committee to explain the matter of the theft then. And the Speaker will recall that Anne Waiguru came accompanied by people I would call goons. And I was unable to prosecute my case before the committee. The Speaker, you will recall that when the initial 800 million or so shillings theft was first highlighted, Anne Waiguru claimed that there was no theft, there was no loss, there was an attempted theft, and she had blown the whistle. The Speaker, along the way, this 790 million or so mutated into figures that you cannot even imagine. Mr. Speaker, you will also recall that at that very initial stage, the attempt to cover up this wanton theft was made by none other than operatives in State House. I remember vividly a statement being issued by the State House spokesperson, exonerating Anne Waiguru and lamenting and claiming that there was no theft, there was simply an attempted theft which they had nipped in the bud. Mr. Speaker, therefore, I want to agree with my colleagues who have spoken that this was a well-orchestrated scheme to rip off taxpayers' money for the benefit of a few well-connected individuals. Mr. Speaker, I may be forgiven to say that this NYS scandal is only comparable to the Goldenberg scandal in magnitude and method of execution. Mr. Speaker, I also want to say that this kind of theft that happened before our own eyes could not have happened if the perpetrators were not assured of the fullest protection ever. Mr. Speaker, you will recall that the NYS department was lumped together with other departments in the then grand ministry known as National Planning and Devolution, a ministry which we can now say with authority was created purposefully to ensure that public money was siphoned out to benefit a few individuals at the expense of the suffering Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, Anne Waiguru was no ordinary cabinet secretary. Mr. Speaker, Anne Waiguru was for all intents and purposes a prime minister in this Jubilee government. And when she appeared before the Committee on Finance to answer to my questions, the arrogance I saw on her face was the kind of arrogance you don't expect to see on the face of an ordinary cabinet secretary. She was so confident to the extent that you could imagine that this was somebody whose tenure of service was so secured that nothing could ever happen to her. That kind of assurance could only have come from the appointing authority. And therefore I want to say, without the fear of contradiction, that what Anne Waiguru and her cohorts, including Harake and Nelson Kitinji, did at the NYS could not have happened without the connivance of State House. It's a very sad day indeed that Kenyans are discussing this report as a post-mortem, when the culprits and the beneficiaries of this massive scam are walking scot-free. We heard the other day none other than the deputy president admitting in public that Anne Waiguru was the mastermind of the NYS scandal. And yet, on the other hand, Anne Waiguru was taking the real whistleblower, Prime Minister Raila Odinga, to court for libel. And yet, the Deputy President, Bwana William Ruto, was alleging that Anne Waiguru was the mastermind of this scam, and yet was still catwalking. He used the term catwalking. Mr. Speaker, as these people continue to catwalk, Kenyans are dying of hunger. Kenyans are unable to afford even basic, simple medical care. Kenyans are unable to take their children to school. Yet, this is the government which came to power on account of support for the youth. And yet, the money which was meant to assist the youth through NYS was being eaten, literally, by crooked individuals with the full knowledge that they had got protection from the highest possible level. It's a very sad day indeed. In fact, this NYS scandal, I would say, is like a hydra-headed octopus with tentacles everywhere, including this house. Mr. Speaker, I am aware that there are even members in this house who benefited from the NYS scandal. I am aware of tenders and contracts which were awarded to people to furnish the so-called Huduma centers. I am aware. And members of this house were involved and they benefited. When the full story of NYS is told, very many heads will roll. And yet this is happening when Kenyans are undergoing a very, very trying moment in the history of this country. Mr. Speaker, NYS was a scandal which was schemed, which was orchestrated, which was planned meticulously with military precision. With military precision. And that's why you see, even as we speak, no single conviction has happened. And I can dare say that you will live until we die, all of us, before any single person is convicted of this wanton theft. Because they've taken a cue from the past. Those who stole Golden Bag money are still working scot-free. Those who are involved in the Anglo-leasing scandal are still working scot-free. And therefore, the NYS masterminds are secure in the knowledge that they will continue to work scot-free, and as so long as they have a government in place which will give them protection. Which will give them protection. Mr. Speaker, the kind of theft that happened in NYS, if it were in other jurisdictions, if it were in other countries, Mr. Speaker, even as there's a change of guard on the chair, these are crimes which are in other jurisdictions referred to as economic crimes. Indeed, even in our own jurisdiction, they amount to economic crimes. In other countries, like Southeastern Asia, people convicted of such crimes, in fact, people suspected of being involved in such crimes, are not even taken through a court process. They are paraded in public and executed. That is what should have happened to these thieves. And yet you see somebody who has masterminded that kind of theft being made to go through a cleansing process. One of them is now running for position of government. Shame on you. These thieves of NYS.
Honorable Wandai, I'll allow you 1 minute so that you wind down.
Mr. Speaker, I was saying that shame on them, shame on these thieves. That someone who was actively involved in the scheming, in the planning, in the execution of this NYS scandal that has cost Kenyans billions of taxpayers' money is now being cleansed by being made to go through some form of election. And very soon, God forbid, will become a governor of one of our very great counties. And I'm not talking about Anne Waiguru alone. And my guru was just but one of the principals. There are more people who are involved in this scam. And I want to say this, that this house will go down in history as a house which abetted theft. How? Firstly, by passing a budget to a department or a ministry that had no capacity to absorb that budget. The NYS budget tripled, in fact more than tripled, within 2 years, from 5 billion shillings to a whopping 20 billion shillings through this house. And secondly, this house will be accused of abetting theft by being party to those contracts.
Very well, the Honorable Appeal. We shall now hear from the Honorable Wesley Korir, member for Chirangal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me a chance to contribute and to say that at least there's something in the floor of the House. At least there's something that shows that the members of Parliament have done their part. Mr. Speaker, and I hope it doesn't end here. I hope that once this thing has been tabled to the floor of the House, the implementing committee should look at it and make sure that the implementation of the recommendation provided by the committee, Mr. Speaker, is followed to the latter. Because to produce such a big document, Mr. Speaker, the public needs to know that this House has spent money, a money that is taxpayers, money that is responsible, that it comes from the people, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as we stand here, I want to say that Golden Bag scandal was to Moi regime. Anglo-leasing scandal was to Kibaki regime. NYS scandal is and will always be Uhuru regime. That is what we will always remember. That is what we will always know this regime and remember this regime of. Because, Mr. Speaker, like the way during the Moi time, they let the Golden Bag scandal to slide through the system, the way the Anglo-leasing slid through the system of Kibaki is the same way the Jubilee and the Uhuru regime has let the Anglo-leasing slide through the corridors of their power. Mr. Speaker, I also stand here disappointed as a Kenyan and as a leader that we as Kenyans do not learn that after somebody has been named the main suspect, the orchestra, the planner, the facilitator of NYS scandal, the people of Kenya have let us down by making sure they elected the same person to run for the office of governor. That, Mr. Speaker, I am very disappointed. I am disappointed that even the party could let somebody like that get a certificate and run for the House, especially when the leadership of the same party have been heard several times, have even accepted themselves several times that the orchestra of NYS scandal is none other than Waiguru. And yet, they have the energy, they have the power, they have the heart of even handing over the certificate to the same person to be responsible for billions and billions of shillings that will go into Kirinyaga County, Mr. Speaker. What is happening in this nation? What is happening in this country? Each and every person in this country needs to go deep inside their souls, search inside their souls, and ask themselves, are they doing the favor to this country or they are spoiling this country forever? We might sit here, we can sit here, we can go to press and blame the leadership, blame everybody. But what is happening is more individual, because when somebody stands up, wakes up at 6 o'clock in the morning, goes to a polling station, puts his or her hand next and puts a tick next to somebody who has been, it is not even a secret, it has been in public domain since this scandal started, that Anne Waiguru is the one that orchestrated it. And yet people can still vote for her. They now see her as a hero, and they're giving her a responsibility of stealing more money. Then where are we going as a country? There is a saying that says, mangi see, mangi do. If we can prosecute, if we can punish the people that steal money from this nation, what will our children learn from it? Because our children will do what we as parents do. That's why we say, mangi see, mangi do. They are seeing what we are doing. When we vote, they are seeing what kind of people we vote. And the same thing they will do because they have seen us do it. And I'm asking the Kenyan citizens, wherever they are, you have been given a responsibility to elect your leaders, to elect leaders who can represent us well. Don't elect thieves. Don't elect thieves. And I hope that this report that the committee has presented, the people of Kirinyaga should go and read it. It should be in every library in Kirinyaga. Should be in every school in Kirinyaga. Should be everywhere, every radio station, Kikuyu radio station, should be reading this thing to their people so that they can know that the person they're about to elect as the governor is a very big thief and an orchestra of a very big scandal that Jubilee will be remembered for. And if I was the president of this country, Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta, I'll make sure that she doesn't receive the certificate. Because people will not remember Waiguru, but people will remember NYS, and people will remember Uhuru Kenyatta. The same way we remember Goldenberg, and when you talk about Goldenberg, you know Moi. When you talk about Anglo-leasing, you know Kibaki. Now when you talk about NYS, you talk about Uhuru Kenyatta. Mr. Speaker, as a member of a committee, that NYS is part of our responsibility, the Labor Committee. Mr. Speaker, when the first time this thing came to our committee, I stood up myself and I said, Mr. Speaker, what we are doing as a country is we are not doing a right thing. When the money and the budget of NYS came in, we live in a country, we accept it or not, we live in a country of vultures. And whenever there is meat, vultures run into. What we did as a house and the government was put meat in NYS, and all the vultures ran to NYS. That was the first mistake we did. NYS didn't have structures. NYS, when it was started before, Mr. Speaker, was a system to train young men. It was just a training. It was like a military training. It didn't have capacity to do anything. It didn't have capacity to do roads. It didn't have capacity and all these things, Mr. Speaker, to be able to undertake what we were telling them to do. And I proposed during that time that it would have been well to leave NYS as a training institute. And then if we want roads to be built, we put money for roads in the Ministry of Roads so that NYS can do the training and then send or second the people they have trained into the Ministry of Road and let the Ministry of Road run the programs. If they wanted to drill wells, there is Ministry of Water that has the capacity, has the system ready in place. They will have trained the youths and second them into the Ministry of Water to do the dams and all that. If they wanted to do the cleaning program they are doing, they will have seconded them into the relevant ministry to be able to do those things. And that, what will have happened is, we will have distributed money into different ministries, and there will be no vultures running into one ministry. But we made a mistake by putting everything into things. If you go to America, Mr. Speaker, where I lived for a long time and I had friends, you went to America, people were leaving America, coming to Kenya because of NYS, to come and steal in NYS. Remember the money that was stolen, our kids will pay for it. Because this country is financed not by domestic money, by my money we borrow from China and other countries. So we borrowed the money, and he went into Waiguru and our friends. So that means my kids in future, my children, the people of Cherangani in future are going to pay for a mistake and for things that Waiguru did in the Ministry of NYS. Mr. Speaker, I hope that a nation will learn. A nation that has not learned, Mr. Speaker, regrets in the future. Our past will charge us. What we do right now, Mr. Speaker, as a nation, our kids in the future will suffer because of it. I hope that this nation does the right thing. I hope that the government does the right thing. And I hope that the people of Girinyaka will do the right thing when it comes to 8th of August to make sure that a thief, an orchestra of theft in this country, the biggest scandal that Jubilee government will be remembered of, is not becoming a governor and is not given another chance to steal from our children. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I hope that this country will go towards the...
Such passion. And very well. I will now give this opportunity to the Honorable Ferdinand Wanyonye.
Mr. Speaker, I have no words to express my disappointment, but I want to take this opportunity to thank the PIC for having come up with these very, very good recommendations, 30 of them. Mr. Speaker, all has been said, and I'm a bit disappointed as a Kenyan that Waiguru, who have read so much about her, could still have the courtesy to go to the good people of our good county and ask for votes. As my colleague from Trans Nzoia just mentioned, it's a sorry case, and therefore we are hoping that the good people of Kirinyaka will listen to us and not punish us twice by re-electing Madam Waiguru as a governor for the good people of Kirinyaka. I have nothing personal about it, but given what it is, Mr. Speaker, I just want to say that I'm in the Committee of Implementation, and the committee has come up with 30 good recommendations. And all we need to do is to make sure that we actually, because I've heard all of them, some of them are quite clear. And the best we can do for this country, as a Committee of Implementation, I don't see all my colleagues here, apart from Dr. Toma, who I work with in that committee, is that I want to promise this House that once we pass this, we adopt this report, Mr. Speaker, we'll make sure that each one of those recommendations by the PSC will be actually implemented. We'll see to it that it's implemented the letter. And any agency that will be called upon to implement whatever recommendation that has been put forward and doesn't do it, and I hope we adopt this report today so that at least it's come before the Committee of Implementation, Mr. Speaker, will then follow it up to be able to see that within 60 days from the time of recommendation, it will be actually be implemented. In the other jurisdictions, Mr. Speaker, like in the Far East, all those people mentioned, and I think also we have to blame maybe the budget committee of this House, where through implementation, supplementary budgets were actually passed, they should have scrutinized and not given as much money, because this particular ministry did not have the capacity to absorb all this money. Because from the first time I read about this was 671 million shillings that has been misused. And all the minister said was that, no, she was a whistleblower. But given what I've heard, and I've not read the report exclusively, is that actually she took part in the stealing. And as somebody mentioned, I think somebody somewhere protected her. At the extent that I think even said House, the first time I had
A statement from State House was that Anna Waiguru was innocent. She was only a whistleblower. But from what I've seen here, this recommendation given by the committee, Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry, she is one part and parcel of the thieves that stole our money. And therefore, if it were in China, she would have faced this firing squad. There's nothing. So, Mr. Speaker, I think I do not want to say more about it. All I'm saying is that I'm a bit disappointed, but I'm also happy that the recommendations have come out very, very clear, and who's supposed to do what. So, therefore, let's adopt this report and move forward and see how we can deal with these thieves. I support the report.
Right. Shall have the Honorable Ronald Tanui, member for Bomet Central. He's not in. I will then give this opportunity to the Honorable Johanna Kipiegon.
Asante sana Bwana Spika. Mimi pia ningependa kuongelea juu ya hili jambo ambaye imewekwa mbele ya bunge ama kwa meza ya bunge. Bwana Spika, kumbuka hii ripoti Bwana Spika tumeingojea kwa muda sana. Na tumesikia maneno mingi. Wale watu ambao walihusika kwa hii maneno Bwana Spika, tunaambiwa ya kwamba walikuwa wanaweka vizuizi kwa mabarabara ya kuleta hiki ripoti hapa bunge. Bwana Spika, nimefurahi leo kwa sababu Bwana Gumbo ambaye tunamjua anaacha hii nyumba anaenda kutafuta kiti ya ugavana huko kwake Bwana Spika, yenye tunamtakia makuu na mazuri Bwana Spika, kwa sababu hii ripoti angalau hachaaja hii nyumba bila kuweka hii ripoti hapa Bwana Spika, kwa sababu laana ingemfuata mahali aendako. Bwana Spika, hii ni ripoti ambaye imeangamiza watoto wetu, wazazi wetu na kila mtu Kenya hii. Watu wakisema Bwana Spika kwamba scandal ya hizo zingine mimi mwenyewe sijaiona, sija experience, nilikuwa mtoto. Lakini hii Bwana Spika, nikiwa hii nyumba Bwana Spika, hii skandali hii ya NYS ndio sisi wenyewe tumekaa tukiona iki happen. Nakumbuka Bwana Spika, wakati Mheshimiwa Alfred Keter wa Nandi Hills alipoamsha hii maneno, tangu kupigwa transfer kwa mtu ambaye anaitwa Kipli Morugut. Bwana Spika, jinsi yenye huyo mtu alipigwa transfer Bwana Spika, ilijulikana wazi kwamba kuna maneno ilikuwa ndio ifanyika hapo, na mtu akapiga akaongea na akanyamazishwa Mr. Speaker. Ikafuata baadaye pia Bwana Spika, mtu akaleta hapa hoja ya kutoa Waiguru. Tukapiga masignatures hapa Bwana Spika, watu wakaitwa, wengine wakapigiwa masimu, atitoeni majina. Bwana Spika, mpaka hiyo motion yenye tungeitumia kulainisha vitu vingine Kenya hii Bwana Spika ikaanguka kwa hii nyumba. Hiyo inamaanisha kwamba kuna watu ambao wako ndani ya serikali ambao hawakuwa wanataka hili jambo liongelelewe, hili jambo lifanyiwe ujasusi mpaka ijulikane wazi kwamba ni nani, wakina nani waliiba. Nakumbuka Bwana Spika, wakati marafiki zangu walikuwa wanapiga makelele, ndugu yetu naibu wa rais mwenyewe alisema sisi ndio tunavaa kuwajibika, achaneni na hawa. Jambo ambalo Bwana Spika baadaye sijui mambo yao ilikuja ikaumana mahali, kaanza kutuambia kwamba mtu hawezi, sijui ndaelezaje kwa Kiswahili Bwana Spika, hawezi catwalk mbele yetu, hawezi tembea mbele yetu kipakapaka ama kiaje Bwana Spika, na ameiba pesa ya nchi ya Kenya. Bwana Spika, hii jambo ya NYS tungependa kuambia rais wa Jamhuri ya Kenya ambaye anatafuta kiti ya urais, kuwa rais wa Kenya mwaka ingine 5. Hii ni wakati ambaye rais mwenyewe angetuonesha ya kwamba chama chake cha Jubilee haitaki ufisadi. Kama vile marafiki zangu wamesema ya kwamba certificates yenye walipewa wale wote ambao walihusika kwa hii wizi yenye yuko hapa Bwana Speaker. Hiyo ndio njia rais wa Jamhuri ya Kenya angetuonesha ya kwamba chama chake haitaki mambo ya ufisadi. Na nimesikia marafiki zangu wakiongelea tu juu ya Waiguru. Waiguru peke yake hajaiba. Waiguru peke yake pia hajaomba kiti. Kuna watu wengine ambao wametajwa hapa. Kuna Mheshimiwa Murkomen ambaye ni senator ya Elgeyo Marakwet. Bwana Speaker, Murkomen ni mwakili ambaye angetumia akili yake kujua ya kwamba kupora kutoka kwa raia ni hatia kwa sababu yeye ni mwakili. Bwana Speaker, Jubilee hawajajali hata Murkomen ametajwa kwa hii maneno, na Murkomen mwenyewe aliulizwa akaanza kutaja gumbo, ati rob, ati wakamati wote wa PSC ati walikuwa wanataka kitu kidogo kutoka yeye ndio sijui jina yake litolewe. Ningependa kuambia Jubilee, ni jambo la ajabu Murkomen amepewa certificate na serikali ya Jubilee inatuambia ati hawataki ufisadi. Hiyo inamaanisha kwamba kukubalia Waiguru, kukubalia Murkomen ambaye alituibia kutumia law firm. Bwana Speaker, hiyo inamaanisha kwamba Jubilee is complacent. Yani iko ndani ya huu wizi yenye inaleka nyewe. Bwana Speaker, nakumbuka pia hata jina ya Duale ilitajwa. Na hii ni watu ambaye juzi tu, mwaka huu, mwaka jana, walikuwa wanatembea hewani. Wanatembea, hawakuwa wanaland. Inji yao ilikuwa juu. Inji yao ilikuwa juu, walikuwa wanaishi juu, walikuwa wanakula juu, karibu hata kama kungekuwa na mandege ya kulala juu usiku, wangelala juu. Walilazimishwa tu na usiku Bwana Speaker, kwa sababu hawezi lala juu, inabidi wakuja walale chini. Hawa ni watu ambao walizunguka na pesa ya NYS wakipiga mdomo. Na kumbuka hata mtu kama Duale kila kona anaenda tu kutusi huyu, na pesa yenye anatumia ni pesa ya uwizi. Bwana Speaker, na yeye bado amekaa kama kiongozi kuu ya Jubilee. Kwa hivyo ningependa niambie tu Mheshimiwa Uhuru Kenyatta, Mungu tu peke yake atakusaidia urudi kwa hii kiti. Akikukubalia urudi, Your Excellency, fagia hii nyumba yako. Hii nyumba ni chafu. Wezi wamejaa kila kona. Ukiingia hii ni kama nyumba yenye haina paka na imejaa rats. Panya. Ukiingia kona hii panya inalia hapo. Ukiingia kona ile nyingine panya iko huko. Mpaka hata ukileta paka moja panya yote watasanyika na kukula hiyo paka mpaka atoroshi. Hii ndio maneno iko kwa hii serikali ya Jubilee. Kwa hivyo Bwana Speaker, hii NYS skandali, hii skandali ya NYS, hii kashfa hii kashfa ya NYS Bwana Speaker, na watu wametuzoea. Kumbuka juzi tu Bwana Rotich alikuja hapa akatuambia kwa sababu ya njaa na ukame iko Kenya hii, tumeamurisha ya kwamba ile mahindi yote inatoka nje watoe ushuru. Bwana Speaker, hata mimi mwenyewe nilishangaa kwa nini Bwana Rotich hajasema tunahitaji tons fulani ya mahindi ndio hii wakora wasitumie walete mahindi. Kumbuka venye wamefanya. Wametuambia mahindi metoka Mexico. Hata Kenya imeingia kwa ile orodha ya 9th wonder of the world. Yaani kutoka Mexico ni 48 hours kufika Kenya. Hijawahi fanyika hata kwa dunia nyingine. Bwana Speaker, Kenya tunajua sisi wengine. Hiyo ni mahindi yenye tulitumia pesa 9 billion kutengeneza galana, irrigation galana, kuweka mahindi. Hiyo mahindi ilivunwa mwaka wa kwanza, ilienda wapi? Mwaka wa pili ilienda wapi? Mwaka wa tatu imeenda wapi? Hiyo ni mahindi ambayo walagai, wakora wa Jubilee walipeleka huko Mombasa na kuweka meli na kutuambia ati imetoka Mexico. Bwana Speaker, hii style tunajua watu wanatafuta pesa ya campaign. Na hatuwezi kubali, hatuwezi lala tukiona. Kwa hivyo tunataka kuambia hiyo maneno ya mahindi, hiyo skandali ya mahindi Bwana Speaker tunaijua. Ni kama hii tu ya NYS, ukikuja upige hesabu. Bwana Speaker, hao watu wametuzoea. Kwa hivyo Bwana Speaker, ningependa tu niseme ya kwamba hii story ya NYS tunataka iishe, tumeiweka kwa meza ya bunge, tunataka yale agencies ya serikali kama EACC, kama DPP, kama CID waingililie hii maneno na ifanyiwe upelelezi mara moja. Wale ambao walihusika wapelekwe kotini, wachajiwe huko. Wezi, Bwana Spika, unaona niliona mtu anaitwa Wambora ama anaitwa sijui somebody, yani inasemekana alifanya tender ya 79 million kutengeneza barabara ya 3.5 kilometers, na amelipwa, instead ya kulipwa hata hiyo 79 million ya uwizi, amelipwa 791 million. Na Kenya tu bado wanaona tu kwa kioo. Bwana Speaker, I wish Kenya ikuwe China for 1 week. Watu wawekwe tu kwa firing squad, ndio watu wajue hii ni pesa yetu, hii ni pesa ya raia, na hatutaki raia waumie. Bwana Speaker, hii skandali, hii kashfa ya NYS tumalize sisi wengine, na tunaomba Mungu sisi zote tutarudi hapa na tutakuja fuatilia mpaka tuhakikishe kwamba wale wote ambao walihusika wamewekwa ndani korokoroni na wakule shida huko, na recover. Lazima recover hiyo pesa ambao waliiba. Hatuwezi funga tu watu na aachie pesa watu wengine.
Nitakuongeza dakika moja Bwana Ngeno.
Bwana Speaker, ningependa niseme next parliament, sisi ambayo Mwenyezi Mungu ataturuhusu turudi hapa, tukuje tuhakikishe kwamba wale ambao watakaa kwa implementation committee wahakikishe kwamba hii maneno imefuatiliwa mpaka mwisho. Na hatuwezi kaa, tutakaa mwezi 6 tunaleta hoja kuuliza ile mambo ya NYS imefika wapi. Mwezi ingine 6 isipochukuliwa tutaleta tena hoja. Hii kitu ya NYS, Bwana Speaker, hatuwezi achilia kama ile ya Goldenberg, hatuwezi achilia kama ile ya sijui nini hiyo ingine walikuwa wameiba huko. Hii tutakuja kalia mpaka tuhakikishe kwamba wale ambao walihusika, Bwana Speaker, wamechukuliwa hatua kisheria yenye wanafaa kuchukuliwa. Bwana Speaker, na support.
Very well. We shall have a contribution from the Honorable Sakwa Bunyasi, member for Nambale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support the report on the NYS. I'm a member of the committee, so I had the distinct privilege of hearing horrendous stories that were narrated. In fact, the committee is not even able to do justice fully to the sentiment and the depth of indignation that surrounded the committee most of the days. Only perhaps a full record, a hearing of the full Hansard would reveal some of it. Mr. Speaker, sir, the intentions of the National Youth Service when it was established 50-some years ago were that some people who care about numbers had looked at the demographics of Kenya and had found that the levels of fertility that were prevalent in those days, Kenya will be sitting in a time bomb 20, 30 years after we got independence. Demography is very easy to predict, and they did. And now we are sitting on this huge time bomb of the youth. And government comes up with a scheme, plays on our psychology, that in fact we are sitting on a time bomb, we must have some creative ways in which you can be able to deal with that time bomb. I didn't realize, at least not me, I didn't realize that time bomb wasn't about the youth. The time bomb was about the looting that was to happen right in front of our eyes. Mr. Speaker, sir, the report is very specific in many, many instances, except some. Let me say why. It's very specific in terms of who participated, on the administrators in the NYS, how carefully it was planned in the Ministry of Devolution and in the NYS to change signatories, to change access to passwords, to facilitate the documentation in the IFBIS, the so-called famous IFBIS system. People were moved, one as far away, Mr. Haraki as far away as Bungoma, where he was a senior DC. He was brought in. When he came before the committee was unable to guess his educational level. It even seemed that high school was part of what he had achieved. But clearly he was a very senior civil servant. We even began to wonder whether given what was his apparent capacity, he had the capacity to learn to use a password. Where people suggested maybe a difficulty using passwords. But no. This is conflict, this complete conflict to enable the movement of huge sums of money. If you listened to the cabinet secretary then, before the committee, you got the impression, given the enormous eloquence and the lot of English that she spews, you got the impression that you're dealing with the victim. But you looked at the details of it, that wasn't the victim in any way. But she did say something, and that's what I say, maybe the report did not fully get into, or couldn't. She said, the real puppeteers are out there. I'm using her words. The real puppeteers, it's not me, they're out there. That would mean that there are several sides. It may be hydra-headed, but that would be too complex, as somebody said. They said hydra-headed. No, I think it's just two-sided. We had the one side that we had in front of us that had been involved in the looting. But you know, sometimes it takes a thief to catch a thief. So the thief then says, oh, but not just me. Look at the other one, even the bigger one. We didn't get there. We didn't succeed to get there. So this story, perhaps, will never be told fully, except in somebody who might write memoirs that will be published perhaps only posthumously. But yet, we ought to know. And I concur fully with my colleagues who have spoken. The institutions that do follow up must get to the bottom of this. The Speaker, sir, it's interesting how a well-intentioned idea, for example, that this will hire youth, that for every one National Youth Service personnel, trainee, that would go out there to work on a public infrastructure or community project, 9 local youths would be hired. Very attractive. Sounds very attractive indeed. But there were several problems. One, who benefited from that kind of public service schemes? You had to be tightly inside, and I think these are now words that are used in all languages. Ndani, ndani, ndani sana. Inside Jubilee, to be able to benefit from that scheme that had been set up. And therefore it was given selectively. And it was implemented in a way that that amount of money, 471 shillings that each youth got, you can't even audit where the money ever reached these youths. Large sums of it were kept. Some of the evidence they had that only 250 shillings is what they could account for across thousands of youth. So it was a scheme to get money for all the people that were involved. That was one. The other part of it, Mr. Speaker, sir, was that, in fact, this was also a scheme to facilitate pseudo-procurement from government agencies like the supplies branch, generating fake documentation that quickly passes through the system and money is released. When money goes into the banks, in almost every case, the money was taken out literally in sacks. Kabura was before the committee. Kabura was the chief architect in front of us in terms of the record at which she set up over 20 companies in a space of just a few days apart. And those were only some of the companies that we found out were related to NYS. Maybe as I speak now, she may have others, why not, in other departments that are doing the same thing. This money will then be wired in and be carried away literally. I think I must be a very poor man, but I can't imagine how I would go across the counter with an order to draw money, to draw 50, 60 million shillings in one transaction. But in a typical day, come back again and draw over 120 million shillings in cash. I remember the committee asking the young lady, and Kabura is a young lady, by age of anybody who is in this house, asking the young lady, how did you carry the money? She said, no, it's easy, I just carried it. Until somebody persisted and said, how did you do it? And gave the example that 1 million shillings bound is about 1 kg. So 62 million shillings is 62 kg. A bag of cement is 50 kg. Ask Kabura whether she would be able to carry a bag of cement. She said, no, she can't. But oh no, she was able to carry 62 kg of cash. So whether she did carry the cash out or not is another question. So there were very many other beneficiaries along the line. The bank that was involved must have been a rogue bank. And since it's one of the banks that we discussed, was Family Bank, KTDA branch, must have been a rogue branch. And I remember my own question to the CEO. I said, Bwana CEO, if you don't clarify this, because she was being very circumlocuous, if you don't clearly clarify this, then I keep asking myself, was this a rogue branch of Family Bank? Was it a rogue bank? And you come to think about it, in any management of any bank, and I was a bank clerk many years ago, many of the things you did, I was in clearing, many of the things you did rose up to the CEO of the bank, perhaps within a day. They could see it. So the CEOs must have seen it. Why would such things be happening? We are the issue of the bank, central bank department responsible, turning a blind eye. And I remember that when we pressed the governor of the bank, he said actually that particular unit does not report to the bank fully. It is really a department, part of the police service thing on the anti-fraud. They were clearly complicit because it couldn't have gone on for so long. Now we look at things now, we have gone through a terrible drought. Drought is not drought. The climate of drought will occur in the short term whether we like it or not. But the human consequences of drought need not occur as they did. And some of the solutions to the human consequences of drought that you can forestall are financial. We had the resources to do things like that. The amount of money we lost just in this particular scheme could have been able to provide water, housing, livestock feed, and so on. Even transported people to areas where you can feed them and have their children get access to education. The amount of money that this government has used, we have been told, like in the Garana scheme, I was doing a quick arithmetic here. If you had that 9+ billion and you simply gave it as a cash outlay to an inch to get packets of unga, you could save families for weeks on end. Mr. Speaker, I think this is one of the lowest points, not only financial governance, but in the evidence of greed that we have shown. No wonder donors are getting very restive with us. I do hope that yours of the DPP will come in. And this is not a matter for one side of the house or the other. Hunger is hunger for everybody. Theft is theft for everybody. I do hope.
Yes, and deference to seniority also. I will allow you a minute. The Honorable Bunyasi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I was just about to say the fairest thing of all that I have said, that I think in a partisan way we must pull together and say no to this kind of greed. We must say no to having people become heroes and heroines after stealing money. I think that this is a culture. I use that word knowingly, and it's a strong word. It's becoming a culture perpetrated by a few, but that really must be changed. Mr. Speaker, sir, I support the report, and I look forward to the full implementation of this report when it gets to the Committee on Implementation and the other government agencies. I submit.
Honorable members, I propose that we shall proceed in accordance with the way that the members have keyed in to show their interest without deviating from it, because I see a lot of interest and anxiety on the members who are present to speak to this. So therefore, we shall kick off with the member from Balambala, followed by the Honorable Nyikal from Seme. I see the member for Laikipia is saying that we should go the usual way, but it's just coming. You'll have your say on it. I assure you, you will.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to contribute to this debate on this important report, the NYS report, which was done by the Public Accounts Committee, which I'm privileged to sit in as a member. And we took months and months to make sure that we get to do as much as possible to get to the bottom of this whole scandal, Mr. Speaker. But let me say on the onset that it is unfortunate that the Kenyan economy is ailing and is always, dealt a big blow by the so-called corruption in mega scales. A colleague who spoke before me earlier here spoke of literally every presidency that existed in this country. You will name the name, and you can name alongside one major scandal of its time. And I want to say that indeed, in our times, the NYS saga is probably the largest and probably will remain to be the largest for quite some time, indeed. And it's my hope that such does not happen again, because having sat through that committee sessions and listening to witnesses and experts talking, Mr. Speaker, it was clear that this was, the NYS saga was a corruption that was shocking in nature, if I may use the word, one that was well crafted, clearly thought through, and using very high skilled or sophisticated professionals, or so calling themselves professionals, to kickstart the process in a manner that will otherwise look very, very noble. So, Speaker, I want to say that the action of one firm, the consulting house, which came in and produced the 5-point vision plan, was the first or the onset or the beginning of this whole scheme. And it had to be made to look like something that is very noble. You know, creation of employment for our youth, using our youthful force to bring development such as roads and ponds and dams. These are noble things that every ordinary Kenyan will aspire to see that it does happen in our country. But unfortunately, the wordings, the sweet wordings, the very fancy TV adverts, very lengthy TV adverts that we saw about the NYS, these young boys and girls kicking high with brand new djembes on their arms, looked quite, sophisticated in its kind. But let me say, Mr. Speaker, what has now come to emerge is that indeed all that was just the framing or the casing of what was big rot in the government at that point in time. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that those who planned to steal decided to do so in a manner that has never been seen in Kenya before. Let me just explain one thing that surprised me very much as I sat through that committee, Mr. Speaker. How will it be possible that invoices, first of all, contracts of the tune of millions of shillings, indeed amounting holistically to over billions of shillings, are issued without going through the government procurement procedures, without going through the ministerial tender committee, for example. 791 million shillings, which was meant to do a road. Indeed, there was no contribution at all to the person that was paid that 791 million shillings. That young lady had nothing to do. She did not even contribute a single grain or a pebble of sand to that particular project, yet she walked away with 791 million shillings paid to her. How did it happen? A fake contract was done through the suppliers branch. Well, that will surprise me. But it is even more surprising to see that the same contract is delivered to the procurement channel of the government of Kenya, all the way to the central bank, without anybody detecting that this 791 million shillings was based on fake invoices, fake LPOs, fake supply branch contract. So, Speaker, indeed I want to say there are certain people who cannot walk away from this. The people who sit at the GPay system of the government, the financial controller at the ministry then, the Central Bank of Kenya, which is a banker to the ministries. How do you pay without authenticating that indeed the payments that you're making are not fictitious payments? So we have, as a committee, Mr. Speaker, recommended investigations into this process, because it is a process that was used to steal from the public, including the Central Bank of Kenya. Thorough investigations be done to unearth the kind of rot that is in there that could potentially be used again. Mr. Speaker, we must admit that this committee was limited in its ability. We do not have the powers to do forensic audit, for example. We could only go to the extent to request or to urge, or as we have done in this report, to ask the investigative agencies to now do the honors for Kenyans and unearth who exactly did this. And I want to say here, Mr. Speaker, I have seen information that is not necessarily captured in this report. I want to say, we have listed companies here, Mr. Speaker. That's the extent we could go. But these companies have claimed to have supplied hundreds of millions of shillings worth of goods, Mr. Speaker, many of which, when we asked the experts, the people in the NYS, they claimed and told us clearly that none of these things were delivered. These names we have listed here, every one of the companies that has been listed here, Mr. Speaker, must be investigated thoroughly, and the payments that they have been made to must be found for what reason that they were paid for. Mr. Speaker, there were big names. I mentioned the consulting house earlier. It is one of them, and I want to say that indeed that particular company itself be investigated, because we now got to know that contrary to information availed to the committee, there was a lot more that was not made available to the committee, that we do know that are potential payments that have been made to that particular company. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that we have also requested for a detailed audit for the Ministry of Devolution, starting from the year 2013 to 2016, because there's a lot that happened there. Over 23 billion shillings was spent, and what we were only seeing is probably about 6 billion shillings. The rest, God knows how they were used. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that the cohorts, the youth cohorts, because that stealing might still be going on, unfortunately, even to this day as we speak. When you see a bunch of young youth walking along our roads with brushes, cleaning up those roads, they are innocent. They might be getting their 400 pay. But what they do not know is that every one of their names have been duplicated 10 times, in some cases, using their IDs duplicated many, multiple times, and multiple of times to the tune of hundreds of millions of shillings being paid and taken away in corrupt manner, using their names and ID cards. Unfortunately, they do not know. So, Mr. Speaker, even now, I believe that there are very many places in the country where these cohorts are in action. Our young youth who have been blinded to be told that you are being employed, unfortunately, they are being used as a scheme to steal from the public using their personal details. We have asked for the investigative agencies to look into those. Mr. Speaker, there is also purported claim that dams were built in places including my own constituency, or areas where, my own county, let me say, because there is none that I know of, Mr. Speaker. None that I know of has been done in my constituency, and I challenged this to the people who were there. Yet again, hundreds of millions of shillings are said to have been used in the construction of those dams. This is action point or recommendation number 29, that we say that those investigations be carried out to make sure that these things are brought out. As I end, Mr. Speaker, I want to say it is very unfortunate that what happened in the NYS did happen. But I think this committee must be understood to the extent that we could go. We could only recommend for the agencies to carry on the investigations, and we urge them to do so with speed, to make those recommendations known or public, and
A member from Balambala, the Honorable Nyikal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise, Mr. Speaker, to support the adoption of this report. And I must start by congratulating the committee and its chair for the work they have done. They have laid out clearly the legal framework under which this has been done, which is extremely important if this country has the guts and the political will to take action on this scandal. Mr. Speaker, they start out by clearly stating the role of the public officers the cabinet secretary, which in this case, Mr. Speaker, in the new dispensation, has got a lot more power and a lot more hands-on than the cabinet secretary in the previous dispensations, and the role of the accounting officer and the role of all other government departments. Mr. Speaker, if you look at all that, and all those officers were involved in this scandal, it is the case of perfect collusion. A situation where all the arms of government, all the officers of government, all the safeguards actually work together to rob the country. It is exactly the same as what happened in the Golden Bag, where any information you required indicating whether gold had been exported was there. Papers to indicate that money came back were there. The only thing they couldn't prove is that if this gold was mined in Kenya, the gold dust should have been so huge, you would actually see it as a mountain if you are in Kericho and it is in Nairobi. That is the power of collusion. And that is exactly what happened here. Mr. Speaker, corruption has gone to an extent that is so well illustrated in this, where it actually takes over the structures of government and behaving like the HIV virus. It takes over, which takes over the body system to produce more and more viruses. In our case, corruption takes over the government system, and each and every department is aiding, abetting, and supporting the theft that is going on. That is what has happened here. Mr. Speaker, I support this report because the recommendations also goes to show that really this was a well orchestrated where the whole government was actually involved. Look at recommendation number 3. The Directorate of Criminal Investigation and Ethics and Corruption could conduct thorough investigations. And then you go through the whole list, and it's a list of banks, a list of business people, a list of government departments. Now, what is then left? So, Speaker, you go to recommendation number 4, which says, Anwar Guru, the former cabinet secretary in the Ministry of Development Plan, be barred from holding public office. You laugh at it because we are in the process, and all elements of the society are aiding her holding a public office. The people of Kirinyaga, the party itself. Now, it's a mockery. It's a mockery of all our systems. You look at recommendation number 6, which looks at, we should look at the lifestyle of top officials in YS. This is something we have said on and on and on, lifestyle audit. We repeat it here in this report, and those people are still living comfortably. You look at recommendation number 7, which is questioning whether the governor of Central Bank could not possibly have picked what was going on. So what part of the government system is left to protect us, to protect Kenyans from this? The Directorate of the Banking System in recommendation number 11 is also found that they are also wanting in their activities in this. If you go to recommendation number 16, the banks that should be investigated, 30 banks in a country have all been implicated in this scandal. What is left of the country? Mr. Speaker, you go on and you look at the companies, recommendation number 19. You have 5 pages, 6 pages, nearly over 100 companies, all have been implicated in this scandal. It means the whole government system, the whole society structure is involved. So corruption has become part and parcel of our daily lives. We talk about it, but really we can't do anything about it because everybody is involved. Nobody wants to act. Because if you act, it's everybody else. Then you see number 26, recommendation number 26, the National Treasury immediately revamp the internal audit functions in ministries, departments, and agencies. The internal auditors are there. All the payments are passing through them. All the vouchers passing. Even if they do systems audit, even if they were just to sample, all these vouchers could not have passed without anybody in the audit department picking that something was amiss. Mr. Speaker, I don't want to cry and repeat what all my colleagues have said. This was a major scandal, well orchestrated. Everybody was aware. I believe Jubilee government must take full responsibility because all those departments, all those officers, all those they are reporting directly to the government. But, Mr. Speaker, to me, what will be most telling of the role of the government at the highest level is if we fail to take this report, which is work in progress, which has indicated to us line by line who action should be taken against. I don't think this is a case where the government system should wait for the implementation committee of parliament. In fact, the leader of majority should pick this through the implementation committee and immediately start working on that. In my mind, if that is not done, then I'll say this was known to the top and there is no desire to act. You cannot get a better report. It is here. Mr. Speaker, last year, the president himself came here with a list and a lot of actions were taken, heads had rolled and people were moved. And if you looked at the evidence that was in the list that the president brought here, it is a child's play compared to what is here. So we would have be expecting that as of now, a lot would have happened. So far as we know, nothing has happened. Even Anne Waiguru literally left on her own volition. The court cases that are going on are actually kind of disappeared. So even the judiciary is part of it. Mr. Speaker, if we really want to, if we are really serious as a country, I've said this before, we should really develop zero tolerance to corruption. I think it's not too much human rights aside. I think we should look at capital punishment. We should have a situation where in this kind of corruption, people actually die because they kill others through these economic crimes. People are hungry now. We don't even have drugs in hospitals. We can't pay our doctors. But this kind of money is in the hands of a few people. I myself see no problem with actually executing people like that because they're slowly executing Kenyans on a daily basis. Mr. Speaker, I support the adoption of this report.
We shall have the Honorable Kenta Mutalel, member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would also like to add my voice to this report, and I support it fully, and I will request the House to adopt it. Mr. Speaker, my colleagues have said over and over again that we are losing our country to corruption. And the worst part of it is that it actually emanates from the top. The institutions, the offices that we expect to protect the interests of this country are actually the perpetrators of the evils that are going on. Mr. Speaker, when the NYS projects were started, I was one of the beneficiaries because my constituency got at least some cohorts, but there were some dams, some ablution blocks that were supposed to be constructed or to be dug. But unfortunately, in their records, these things were done, but on the ground there is nothing. None other than the head of state himself and his deputy actually gave those as examples of what the government has already done. You can imagine the level of deceit that we're experiencing in this country. Those things were not done, and I hope that they should not in any way portray that any money was spent in my constituency, because that would be a false allegation. It is criminal, and we are still insisting that those programs must be done. Mr. Speaker, when you look at the youth of this country, they are suffering. They are suffering because the economy has been raped, it has been destroyed, and they've been rendered hopeless, they've been rendered disparate. They have actually been made to believe that they do not belong to this country, or this country is against them. And I call upon the youth of this country to rise up and say, enough is enough. Let us change the as the truth. Who was actually collecting billions of shillings at the basement of some banks? It cannot be that small girl who I understand is already having a lot of challenges because of the frustrations and the stress that she's undergoing at this particular time. Mr. Speaker, when you look at the companies that are involved, when you look at the institutions, when you look at the offices, you wonder what we have come to as a country. One of them is the Central Bank of Kenya. How did these gigantic theft take place without the Central Bank noticing? They must have been complicit. There are officers in this country whereby the confidence of the highest, holders of high offices were involved. Were they doing it for themselves, or were they agents of those offices? Where is the cover-up? Who is covering up? And I believe we should not only investigate those individuals, but we should investigate their masters, because I suspect their masters were very much involved. There is no way such a terrible looting can happen, yet the biggest officers in this country are not aware of, yet their servants, their personal assistants are very much involved. Mr. Speaker, this is not a new phenomenon in this country. A few years ago, we had the maize scandal, whereby a minister in office at that time will actually give cheats to people to go and buy maize by mouth and sell it at exorbitant prices to other people, to millers. Somebody will make 800 million without even moving a grain of maize from the stores of NCPB. The same case happened with Goldenberg. The same case happened with Anglo-leasing. For how long will the Kenyan taxpayer withstand this kind of looting? And to cover up our problems, we go borrowing all over the world, not knowing where the payment money will come from tomorrow. We have abandoned our young children. We have abandoned the born and the unborn. For how long will we stand this as a country? We are breaking down as a country, and the Kenyans should know that. And when you hear people going all over the country singing that they've actually achieved a lot, you laugh at them. You laugh at them because the people they're addressing are starving. The people they're addressing are walking without clothes on their backs. The people you are addressing are actually getting out of school. Their children are getting out of school because they cannot pay school fees. Their factories have been closed. Their livestock cannot even get grass because the forests have been depleted. You laugh at them and wonder, do they think Kenyans are foolish? They should know that Kenyans are not foolish. And on 8th of August, they'll realize that. Mr. Speaker, all I can say is this. We should not let this looting of NIS go unpunished. We have heard of perpetrators. And one thing I've always asked myself about NIS, when they removed Rugut on a Sunday, what was the logic of that? Who was preparing the way for this? Because I think that was the main reason. We want to ask the person who said in public that they are the ones he's the one who's removed him, and they are the ones who removed him because they are the ones with the power, not small people like Waigoro. We want that person to explain to us what was the reason, because we suspect, and I personally suspect, the reason was to ensure that a path was cleared for them to loot. There is no way that something like that would have been done without a very senior person doing that. And we have had experience of the past of the same people. The same people. Even though we really castigate the lady, we must ask ourselves, who was behind the grabbing of Ngong Forest at one time and selling it to some government parastatal? Who was involved in the grabbing of some land in Langata which was supposed to be for the aerodromes? Who was involved in many, many other scandals? And they are the same ones who are running around saying that they're cleaner than their neighbors. And I think that is not the truth. Mr. Speaker, there is the issue of ISMIS, which was abused. If the Kenyan people, if the Kenyan government knows that this ISMIS is prone to abuse or prone to misuse, why haven't they taken any measures to rectify the situation? I can only deduce that they did not want to do so because they want to loot even more, especially this time when the elections are actually around the corner. Another colleague just mentioned the maize, and I think I mentioned that in the morning, that there is a miracle in Kenya these days, that you can order for maize in Mexico, and in 5 days, they arrive. The maize arrives in 5 days. What is this? And somebody now has the audacity to come and say, I did not say the maize was coming from Mexico. I thought it was coming from Mexico. How can a government operative, one of the most senior officers in this country, say he did not know and give? How? We must actually investigate that maize, who is behind it, whether the same cartels are behind it, because if this is as big a scandal as NYS, and there will be more. And the Kenyan people must know it is now their time to rid themselves of these corrupt people, these corrupt animals, because when Nyerere said Kenya is a man-eat-man society, it's actually now a parent-eating a child society. Because if it is the biggest, the big men in our society who are eating what belongs to our children, who are destroying this country, then we are actually eating our children, and we must stop the eating of the future of our children. Mr. Speaker, I think as Kenyans, we must still realize that we have a future. We have suffered so much over the years since independence. We have had tribalism. We have had all those evils. And you know, the other problem is the managers of the economy, the managers of everything are incompetent because we give them because they are our brothers, they are our relatives, they are our neighbors. But I believe Kenya has a hope. We have hope because we cannot lose hope. The moment we lose hope as a country, we are going to disintegrate. And this is a defining moment. 2017 is the defining year for this country. We must either choose to start afresh or to remain with the old and destroy ourselves. We must really think afresh. And the only way we can reclaim our country is to change the system. Is to change it. And we have said before, we know what has been happening. We have seen symbolic elections, and some people are planning to actually bring those shenanigans of theirs to the elections of 8th August 2017, and I'm requesting them.
My senior, the Honorable Olekenta, you'll have a minute just to wind up.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This country belongs to us. The shenanigans we saw in the elections of Jubilee, the shenanigans we saw in the other parties must not be allowed in the general election. And if anybody is thinking, or is imagining, or is dreaming of bringing those kind of activities, those evil activities to the general election of 2017, please forget it, because this country is bigger than you. Just know that this country is bigger than you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support the adoption of the report.
Very well. I see the Honorable Kimaru looking at me, but the Honorable Kimaru had given directions that I will follow the script here. You will have time. Everybody will have time. But I will give those who came before you an opportunity to go at it first. In the order that of interest, then we have the Honorable Ken Okoth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think, let me begin by saying a big thank you to the Public Accounts Committee led by Honorable Engineer Gumbo for doing a thorough report. And a lot of people doubted that this report would see light of day, and I am relieved and encouraged to see the report has made it to be debated in the open, and I hope it will be put in simple PDF format so it can be shared widely for Kenyans to read and for it to go as a document of a shameful scandal in our history. And we must make a choice as a country whether we will learn from it or not. When I look at this report and the issues that have been discussed and the matters that the members have focused on in the debate today, it's clear that there are people in this country who are not just contented to steal money and public resources, but are committed to stealing the dreams of our young people, to stealing their hope, and to robbing the future of our children and the children of this nation and the next generations who will be forced to pay for services and debts which were incurred in the name of the public but were never provided. Our country faces many problems. One of them is the issue of youth unemployment. Youth unemployment is not just an economic issue, but it's also a security issue. It's also a morality issue. Let me give you an example. In Kibra constituency and in many urban areas in this country where there's high unemployment, but even in some of the rural constituencies where the NYS Youth Empowerment Program was supposed to come in and provide opportunities for training and for transformation through publics and civil works and improvement of infrastructure and water plants and other things. The young people live without hope. They feel left out. They feel cheated by an insensitive and out-of-touch leadership class. When a project like this is conceived with very sweet words, with very slick public relations and media and branding, it gives them a hope. Finally, we've been remembered. Here is something for us. Here is something that will really engage us and give us a chance to be empowered. We will earn from our own sweat. We will have the dignity of working and earning, and we will not be begging. We will not be waiting for handouts from politicians, but we will be improving our environment, cleaning up Kibra, building up roads that the community needs, building up water plants in rural areas where they are needed, and contributing to society and earning justly from it. This was a promise of what NYS and the NYS transformation program was supposed to do. We had a taste of it, and then it was all robbed. Kibra was a pilot venue. As MP for Kibra, I am a member of ODM. It was a very, very, very demanding and very high-pressure situation to be in for me as a member of ODM, to take a position that would make sure that my people, who are taxpayers of this country, have access and a right to receive government services and a youth empowerment program. That for over 50 years, where the government had not been doing things such as basic sewage, access to water, improvement of the housing conditions, and all these other things, security through roads and improvement of the business environment, security through construction of lighting and all these things, that suddenly this investment and engagement with the government would come to make a change, regardless of whatever political angle was being presented to it then. I thought it was my moral duty to at least give the benefit of the doubt and take the position that the people of Kibra are taxpayers and they're entitled to government programs that can uplift the environment they live in, and it would not just be an investment in infrastructure, but it would be an investment in our people. Well, now in hindsight, and as I read the shocking details in black and white of this well-done report, it's clear that we were tricked and that the promise of what NYS was supposed to do, to empower the youth of Kibra and to uplift them out of poverty, versus the reality we, the people of Kibra, were taken advantage of, and our youth were taken advantage of, so that a few people, including a few companies, including a few banks that are well known, participated in a conspiracy to steal millions, billions, while pretending to be giving our young people tokens through NYS employment. When the program started in Kibra, a lot of young people, over 3,000, eventually participated in the program. And the intentions were noble, and if they had been fully implemented, Mr. Speaker, my constituency was going to be one that is fully transformed in a major, major, major way. And it would be a model for really development, a Kenyan solution to Kenyan problems that we could move to other counties and really focus on and implement. The young people were promised that they would earn money and the money would be saved, a portion of the money, which would then be relayed to them as owners and shareholders in SACCOs, in savings and credit cooperatives, which would then be, once they have gained skills in construction, in cleaning, capacity to do recycling and things like that, they would have their own money to become investors and contract with the government of the county of Nairobi or the national government to do construction work and slum upgrading in Kibra. That we would move from mud houses to young people in Kibra having the capital to build affordable Makiga-style housing that is of a decent quality to uplift our neighborhoods. But that did not happen. This report tells us very clearly that the money that the young people of Kibra are saving for their SACCOs, and until today I want to go on record, when I meet the leaders of the groups in the villages in Kibra that the NYS cohorts had, their SACCO money has not been relayed to them fully. This was a robbery, not just of the state, but a robbery of the hard-working sweat of the young people who earned this money, and their SACCO money, only a portion of it was taken. And I know a lot of people are discussing here the Cabinet Secretary Waiguru, who's running for governor in Kirinyaga, but there's a Cabinet Secretary for Devolution now, there's a Cabinet Secretary for Treasury in place now, there's a Cabinet Secretary for Youth and Gender Affairs now. We are putting it on record that the money that the young people of Kibra worked for, they earned in over 12 months, the savings that were held by NYS, and as the reporter said here, over 500 million of it was used by NYS to pay for recurrent expenses. When the young people thought their money was being held in trust, it would be earning interest and it would be their money to invest in their own businesses. NYS was using that money illegally to do other recurrent expenditures. And up to until now, the SACCOs of the young people in Kibra have not received their full money. This is a theft of the young people's dreams and hopes, and it is a betrayal. And I know CS Waiguru is gone, but there's a CS for Gender and Youth Affairs. There's a CS in the Treasury, and there's a CS for Devolution. They must do right by the young people of Kibra and pay their money. And they should pay their money before August 8th, because those angry young people on August 8th will pay them in a different way if they don't get them their money that they earned. The young people of Kibra don't want handouts. They don't want favors. They want an opportunity. And they got that opportunity and they worked and they cleaned up Kibra. A lot of young people chose to reform. They got away from activities of petty crime. Those who are ladies got away from issues that include even desperate situations where you have to sell your own body just to make a living and buy a bag of unga to feed your child. Those are the situations that we are dealing with, and that the betrayal of the NYS that happened here, you can see. I know a lot of people are focusing on the figures, but I choose to tell the personal story of the young people. We were promised, and Mr. Speaker, I see my time is running, if I can beg in advance just for a minute, on the issue of food security in Kibra. The young people were promised, and the whole community was given a model that we would subsidize food for the most vulnerable communities in Kibra and places like that by making sure the young people were trained, they had the capacity, they owned the posho mills that they were given, and that they would be buying grain from the National Cereal and Produce Board at a subsidized price, and they would be milling that grain as small posho mill holders within Kibra and youth groups, and selling it to the community at an affordable price. That did not happen. It was a...
The Honorable Court, you have your minute.
That did not happen. And we saw the young people in Kibra didn't get all the portion mills working, and the maize was not delivered. And I apologize to them. And I apologize to the whole country, because on 2 occasions, when the CS was being questioned in this house, I rose up in good faith to defend her. I never gained anything personal from NYS. I was working in trust for my people for a project that I thought was with good intentions. Now it turns out my people were being used to create a situation where billions would be stolen and their rights were abused. And I think the bare minimum, and my only key argument that I want to make here today, is that the young people of NYS who worked in Kibra, all their savings that needed to go to their circle should be given to them, so they have all that capital at hand. It's money they have earned. It was taxed. Let them get the money so they can use it to start their own businesses, expand their own businesses, and be free to work with dignity and invest like any other people. But it is time that all the people who have been mentioned here and the amounts that have been mentioned be recovered. We have a tradition in this country of mentioning scandals but never recovering the money. We know the money was stolen. We know the banks that handled it. We know the people who took it. I think the government, at the very least, should recover that money and bring it back so it can be used to do many things. I get a CDF of about 90 million a year. When you're looking at the companies here that were stealing 200 million at a time in single contracts, that's money for 3 years that could build for us even 10 new high schools so young people can go. It could build 2 new TVET institutions. It could start a new college or a small university in Kibra. Yet these people stole, and this money should be pulled back, because I'm sure it did not go abroad. It is still in this country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity, and I support and appreciate the work that has been done for this report. Thank you.
Very well, the Honorable Court. We'll have the Honorable Tuoma.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute to this report. Mr. Speaker, I have first of all to say that also as a member of a watchdog committee, that is the Public Investment Committee, that complements or supplements some of the other work that PAC is also doing, I've really been taken aback. Mr. Speaker, as I also stand here, I'm a former minister who was also in charge of the National Youth Service. And Mr. Speaker, if I look at the vision that we had for the Youth Empowerment Program through the National Youth Service, in collaboration with other development partners, Mr. Speaker, during my tenure, we signed a contract with the Chinese government of over 5 billion shillings to bring in equipment that could be used by the youths of this country to create opportunities as they do their national building duty. Mr. Speaker, it is so disappointing, and Mr. Speaker, even flabbergasted, to see that the noble policies and ideas that we come up with are hijacked by this monster called corruption to kill the dreams of our youths and even to kill the development agenda of this country. Mr. Speaker, we know that the National Youth Program was not just to create employment for youths or opportunities, but it was also to transform them into productive citizens. Mr. Speaker, in the process of doing that, they were also supposed to produce food that was going to form part of the basis of food security in this country. But Mr. Speaker, we can see from the report that the whole program was hijacked by the cartels of corruption and redirected a program that was noble in helping the country meet self-sufficiency in food and reduce unemployment among the youth. And the whole program was hijacked by the very same people who are supposed to be custodians of public, as either public servants or ministers of a government that had been voted in to help alleviate the suffering or the problems that Kenyans that were going through. And you find that a whole system comes up with a conspiracy to do nothing but just to steal from the public. Mr. Speaker, I'm surprised that one Anne Waiguru, whether she did it directly or not, all these things happened under her watch. And Mr. Speaker, in 2010, we voted in the new constitution. And there's a chapter there that talks about how public servants or state officers should behave. But if you look from this report, Mr. Speaker, and even the recommendations there, it is very surprising that somebody who has watched over a whole institution of National Youth Service collapsing and dreams of so many youths going down the drain is again today being rewarded a few months later with another responsibility to more or less just go and do the same, because they say it is very difficult to teach old dogs new tricks. The tricks that were just used in NYS, Mr. Speaker, I believe will be the same tricks that these people will employ. Mr. Speaker, one Anne Waiguru was not just coming from any other sector. She was a civil servant. For her even to have circumvented the normal procedures or standard operating procedures of government by appointing officers in positions that do not exist. Because as far as I'm concerned, we passed a law here where we said that the person in charge, the accounting officer of the National Youth Service, is the Director General. Before that, it just used to be a director. But you remember we amended the law to make them now a Director General with enhanced responsibilities. But I'm surprised to see that my friend, Mr. Githinji, is circumvented in his role, and somebody is just brought in the name of Halake, and a position is created that does not exist. And this person is given the responsibility of an accounting officer to be an AI holder. And then he comes and wants to hoodwink the whole country that somebody stole his IFMI's PIN number and they started transacting without him being there. And Mr. Speaker, as we speak today, some of these fellows are just still walking our streets. Some are even transforming themselves into politicians to come here and play oversight roles over the very same institutions that they have helped to loot. Mr. Speaker, it is a sad day and a sad moment for our country, because one Mr. Halake should be behind bars. Mr. Speaker, I was even surprised when one name appeared there, Mr. Otuoma, and Halake, before the committee, tried to associate that name with me, thinking that that was my brother. And you can see how the networks of corruption, they want to pull in everybody to think that in the process of smearing you, then they can get away with something, only to turn out that this one Otuoma was neither my brother, nor my son, or anybody related to me. This was just a Kenyan, like any other Kenyan, who was involved in whatever scandal that has been mentioned there. But this Halake, in his submissions, tried to drag my name in, Mr. Speaker, and as I said, that was neither my brother nor any one of my relatives. Mr. Speaker, we are also very much aware that there are procedures whereby you can get consultants within government. But that does not mean you should contravene all the procurement laws or any other law, government or operating laws that are supposed to be in effect. But you can see in this case, where one consulting firm, it is procured, they are even overpaid, and some of the things that they have been procured to do, Mr. Speaker, are not completely the solution to the problems that NYS was facing. Because when we did reforms in National Youth Service, we said that we must be able to create capacity within the institution. But instead of continuing to create capacity in that institution, all that was circumvented, Mr. Speaker. And in the process, you find that an institution that had a budget of only 1.5 billion, there's no way that institution within the time frame that was given would have created capacity to absorb all these billions of shillings that were being channeled through. And that's why you can see in this country, when you want to steal public funds, you come up with consultants, Mr. Speaker. And I want to commend the chair, my brother Gumbo, whom I know, again, the cartels of corruption have also, again, infiltrated our parties. And you can see the kind of damage they did to some of us, not because the Wananchi were not in support, but cartels that are used to corrupting and obtaining everything through corruption have also been able to infiltrate some of our parties and do the kind of things that they did in terms of us having very sham nominations, not just in ODM, but I believe equally in Jubilee, where in a whole region, there is currently a conspiracy theory that there were some tall trees that were supposed to be trimmed or to be cut down. But a lot of times when your hedge overgrows is what you trim. I've never seen a process where you trim tall trees, because people want trees to grow tall so that you can get timber and other things. But we trim hedges so that they look clean. Unfortunately, with our brothers in Mount Kenya region, there was the trimming of tall trees. Again, Mr. Speaker, if you'll go back, you'll see that these were all just cartels of corruption that again just, mutating in different forms. And I'm not just saying in Central. Even me, myself, I've been a victim of a corruption, a party that I spent a lot of my youthful energy building, all of a sudden thinking that we are going through democratic process that we have been fighting for. You find that there are other parameters that are used. I know, Gikaria, you are lucky. You are not part of Mount Kenya, although you try to be more Mount Kenya than the people from Mount Kenya. But you are more of a Nakuru diaspora person. Mr. Speaker, coming back again to the National Youth Service, I would really urge that the institutions that have been created, like the anti-bank fraud unit, the Finance Reporting Center, Mr. Speaker, some of these institutions are not carrying out their mandate. And this is the biggest problem. As somebody here was saying, if you have got 60 million shillings, is almost like 60 kilos. How are you able to withdraw this kind of money and move away with it? And yet there's the Financial Reporting Center, which has not said anything. It has not reported anything. And we have seen all scandals within government are perpetuated by these very same institutions that we had brought in to...
The Honorable Thomas, I will add you a minute.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I said, some of these institutions that we created, they are supposed to be watchdog committees over public institutions, but they are not doing anything. And even as we put this report in Parliament today, and you see the recommendations there, no action is going to be taken. And if in this country we can be coming up with institutions, putting in them men and women who are unable to perform, and at the end of the day, the country loses resources, and we come back here, and it just becomes a report. I hope, as we go out, that this report is going to be acted on, and it should be an example of what not to do when you're a public servant. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me that opportunity.
Very well spoken, Honorable Toma, and we wish you well in your...
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't think it's in order for the honorable member for Magarini to quote me the way he has done and to misrepresent my contribution to this debate. I said NYS came to Kibra with very big promises, the size of an elephant. What NYS delivered in Kibra was the size of a rabbit. There's a big difference there. So I resent that he is presenting as if I was here praising NYS. But number two, he is contradicting what the report of the committee has said here for a fact. He's misleading the House that it is impossible, that there were double payments. Yet, if you look on page 154 of the report, item 28 and 29, and gives a table on 155, the specific amounts which were paid through Safaricom, payments where recipients had identical ID numbers were 9,170. I know the system has been improved now, but the fact of the matter is, at the beginning, that amount of money was lost. There were payments that were made to beneficiaries with identical phone numbers in the beginning, 8,752. So I don't think it's factual, and he needs to withdraw that and just moderate his presentation and say what he sees is good about the project, but also not to throw into doubt the work of the committee that is here in black and white through his opinion.
You are looking at what page of the report that states that there are those double, triple payments. What page is it, so that the Honorable Kombe can just look at it?
Yes, and so I just rise on the point of order for the sake of accuracy, and to say he needs to, page 154 and page 155 has a table that breaks down how 240 million, a quarter of a billion, was paid in excess payments and never reached our youth. That is money that could go to Magarini constituency as CDF for 4 years.
Very well. The Honorable Kombe.
Asante Mheshimiwa Spika. Mheshimiwa Spika, kama anavyosema Mheshimiwa Ken Okoth, ahadi zilikuwa ni kiasi kima cha ndovu, lakini kilichotendeka ni kima cha sungura. Sawa, hicho kima cha sungura hakikuwepo mbeleni. Unastahili kuwa na shukrani. Mheshimiwa Spika, nikiendelea mbele kidogo, yapasa pia ieleweke kwamba kuanza jambo si kazi rahisi. Huwa kuna changamoto nyingi, na hayo yote ambayo yamesajiliwa hapa ndani, kuna uwezekano mkubwa kwamba yametendeka, na tuseme yametendeka. Lakini kufikia hivi sasa tunavyozungumza ni kwamba hali hiyo imerekebishika. Na nimesema kutoka mwanzo kwamba naunga mkono taarifa hii na hatua za kisheria zikapata kuchukuliwa kwa ambao wamepata kusika. Lakini pamoja na hayo ninasisitiza ya kwamba mabadiliko yale ambayo yameletwa na huduma hii ya taifa yanastahili kupongezwa, maana ni pembe zote za Kenya ambazo zimepata huduma hii, na kuna mabadiliko hata kitabia ya hawa vijana wetu. Kwa hivyo ni jambo ambalo tunastahili kulipongeza. Na Mheshimiwa Spika, ni vyema kabisa kwamba kinachotendeka, nilikuwa nimefika mahali kwa kuzungumzia swala la unga. Baa la njaa halikuanza jana, lakini ikiwa mtu ameona mapema kwamba kuna shida na akachukua hatua kimapema kabla ya kuitangaza hiyo hatua, mahindi yaliagizwa juzi na kuamkia leo mahindi yashafika. Kuna shida gani? Muhimu watu wetu wapate kupona, ama muhimu wa watu wetu wazidi kuangamia kwa kucheleweshwa kwa chakula? Mheshimiwa Spika, inafaa tukiwa wa Kenya tukaweze kuchukua fursa ya kushukuru kwa mambo yale ambayo yanatendwa. Mimi kwa sasa hivi, kwanza ifahamike ya kwamba NYS, huduma hii ya taifa, haikuanza wakati wa Jubilee. Imekuweko hata katika serikali zingine huko nyuma. Kwa hivyo yale yote ambayo yamepata kutendeka ni mabadiliko yameonekana wazi, na ni wajibu wetu kuboresha hii huduma tukipata nafasi ya kuwa maafisa ndani ya sehemu hiyo ama katika kuongoza wizara hiyo. Naamini kabisa wale ambao wamechaguliwa hivi sasa kuongoza hiyo devolution na hiyo huduma ya taifa ya vijana, kwamba wataiweza kuitoa pale ilipo na kuisongeza mbele katika hali nzuri zaidi kuliko vile ilivyokuwa. Na hivyo ikipata kutendeka, sote tutashukuru. Namaliza kwa kusema kila mtu abebe msalaba wake. Atakayepatikana na hatia, mkono wa sheria ukapate kutumika. Asante Mheshimiwa Spika.
Very well. The Honorable Member for Nakuru East.
Asante sana. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. I can see the time is almost, I hope I'll get my minutes tomorrow to be able to finish. But Speaker, it is sad to sit this evening and listen to somebody like Honorable Savula, the Member of Parliament of Lugari, complaining. And I wish he was just here so that I could be able to pass this message to him. Mr. Speaker, if my memory serves me right, Honorable Savula was elected the member of the Agricultural Committee when we came to Parliament. And the nature and the manner of which he was removed as a chair just speaks. And I hope the people of Lugari did not give him an opportunity under NASA to be able to serve them. Because according to the report that we got that time and his removal, it is so damaging than what he is talking about regarding the Jubilee government. It's unfortunate for a member of parliament.
Honorable Gikaria, you have been a very good debater in the House previously, but you know that if you want to discuss the character of any of the members, then you know what to do. But that being the case, and in all events, Honorable members, the Honorable Gikaria will have a balance of 9 minutes when this particular motion again appears. And the time being 6:30 p.m., this House stands adjourned till Thursday, the 18th May 2017 at 2:30 p.m.